Chapter 241. Go to watch net. The moment Li Yundong saw the second 5-yang blood pearl fly up, all the hair on his body stood on end. All the 36,000 pores on his body suddenly opened, and the Jinqi in his body suddenly surged out. This was all the potential that a person could burst out at the moment of life and death. Li Yundong's Jinqi poured out like a flood, like a huge wave rushing toward the 5-yang blood pearl that was about to explode. Go to watch net. The moment the Jinqi wrapped around the 5-yang blood bead, the 5-yang blood bead suddenly exploded with a bang. The explosive force shook Li Yundong's body, and the Jinqi he had released was almost instantly scattered. The rolling dark red flame continued to spread, and in the blink of an eye, it rushed toward Li Yundong. At this time, all the Jinqi in Li Yunyan's body was pouring out. It could be said that he had no power to defend himself at all. He couldn't even pick up the fan of 7 treasures. He could only watch the flames and the ghosts rushing at him fiercely. A thought suddenly flashed through his mind: it's over. But with a thought, the fan of 7 treasures in his hand suddenly jumped up and flew out of his hand. As it jumped into the air, all the leaves of the fan opened up. Every leaf made a clanging sound and quickly jumped out of the fan, forming a row in the air. It was like a steel wall that had appeared out of nowhere. The roaring flame suddenly hit the iron wall of the fan of 7 treasures, and its momentum was immediately blocked. Li Yundong, who was behind the fan, only felt a scorching heat blowing in his face, and the ends of his hair were curled up by the roasting heat. Li Yundong saw that the flame was blocked by the fan of 7 treasures and quickly spread around. Seeing that the room was about to become a sea of fire, he subconsciously thought, "Oh no, this house is going to be destroyed." As soon as this thought flashed through his mind, the iron wall in front of him suddenly made a clanging sound and quickly pulled open into a circular iron wall, firmly wrapping the flame in it. Although the number of the fan leaves was limited and there was inevitably a gap in the middle, the high-speed rotation of the fan made up for this. Moreover, as the fan leaf rotated at high speed, the golden Sanskrit on the fan leaf also floated out, forming a thick and dense layer of golden pagoda inside and outside. Go to watch net. 7 KOM. At first glance, Li Yundong could only feel the golden light and awe-inspiring divine power. He was shocked and couldn't help thinking, could it be that the fan of 7 treasures knows what I'm thinking? Ah, right, the so-called fan of 7 treasures is naturally psychic. Not only can it protect its master, but it can also know its master's thoughts. Thinking of this, Li Yundong began to consciously control the treasured fan. He thought to himself, can I refine the flames and ghosts of the 5-yang blood pearl? Sure enough, the rapidly rotating blades of the psychic fan of 7 treasures suddenly stopped, and the golden Sanskrit characters floating in the air around the blades also stopped in the air, as if they were sculptures. After a while, the ribs of the psychic fan of 7 treasures suddenly jumped into the middle of the flames, like a Buddha who was about to sacrifice himself to feed the eagles. It stood in the middle of the flames, receiving the burning of the flames and the biting of the ghosts, motionless. Li Yundong's eyes widened. He saw that some of these fan of 7 treasures were sitting cross-legged and chanting sutras, some were glaring, some were subduing demons, and some were putting their hands together. Their postures were all different. With the sound of the fan leaf spinning, Li Yundong could even faintly hear the solemn chanting of sutras coming from the flames. Li Yundong's eyes widened. He saw that some of these arhats and vajras were sitting cross-legged and chanting sutras, some were glaring at vajras, some were subduing demons, and some were putting their palms together. Their postures were all different. With the sound of the fan leaf spinning, Li Yundong could even faintly hear the solemn chanting of sutras coming from the flames. The chanting seemed to come from an extremely distant place. It was empty and distant. Li Yundong couldn't hear what was being chanted, but he could feel that there was an extremely powerful force in the sutra. The moment the sound of the scripture rang out, the vengeful ghosts in the flames suddenly began to wail miserably. The dark red flames also became alternating between green and blue, twisting and rolling. One after another, the ferocious faces of the vengeful ghosts rolled about in the flames. They looked terrifying, and the situation was like purgatory. After a while, the high-speed rotating fan leaf began to slowly close, compressing the flames and ghosts in the middle bit by bit. Gradually, they were compressed into a ball. When there was only the size of a fist left, the shining golden Vajra arhats suddenly moved. Their bodies all gathered above the ribs of the psychic fan of 7 treasures, forming a life-sized Vajra. There was a 7-colored halo behind this Vajra, and behind the halo were 5 colored feathers that resembled the feathers of a peacock, bright and dazzling. He had 3 heads and 6 arms, and his upper body was bare. The muscles on his body were bulging, and he was filled with a mighty sense of power. He wore a golden Arhat Kasaya, and his feet were bare as he stepped on a 7-colored auspicious cloud. As soon as Li Yundong saw this Vajra, his body shook violently. He suddenly thought of the 3-headed and 6-armed god he had visualized. He thought to himself, could it be that this 3-headed and 6-armed Vajra has some connection with the Vajra I visualized? Or is it just a coincidence? As soon as this thought flashed through his mind, he heard Vajra shout loudly and recite scriptures. His voice was loud and clear, but he was speaking in a foreign language. Li Yundong couldn't understand a word at all. He smiled bitterly and thought to himself, F***ck, no wonder they say that foreign monks can recite scriptures. They're all reciting scriptures in a foreign language. What did he say? After Vajra finished reciting the scriptures, a figure suddenly flashed on the balcony of Li Yundong's house. It was Zi Yuan who had heard the sound and was standing on the balcony. When she saw the 3-headed and 6-armed Vajra, she was suddenly shocked and cried out involuntarily, Akalanatha. As soon as she finished speaking, she saw the Akalanatha suddenly glare at her angrily. With this glare, Zi Yuan felt as if she had been hit by a hammer in the air. Her whole body trembled, her heart was pounding, and her Taoist heart was in chaos. Zi Yuan was shocked in her heart. So powerful. Is this the deity of the fan of 7 treasures? While she was in shock, she saw the 3-headed and 6-armed Akalanatha disappear in an instant. The fan leaves around the last flame suddenly closed, squeezing all the flames in it and forcibly extinguishing them. The spirit of Compass, who had been squeezed into a ball in the flame, was also squeezed into a cloud of smoke in an instant. Go to see the net. Then the fan leaves separated with a click, and all the fan leaves flew back into the fan bones of the fan of 7 treasures. The sound was sonorous, like a sword being sheathed. After the fan of 7 treasures returned to normal, it folded the fan leaves in the air with a clang and fell to the ground with a bang. However, it did not fall down, like a stone monument. Li Yundong walked closer and saw that the fan bones of the fan of 7 treasures were faintly surrounded by a layer of black mist. In the mist, there was a distorted and terrifying face of a resentful ghost. What's going on? Li Yundong was taken aback and couldn't help asking. Zi Yuan also came over and looked at it carefully. She suddenly raised her head and said in surprise, You refined the 5-yang blood bead into the fan of 7 treasures? Li Yundong said blankly, I don't know, but it seems to be so. Zi Yuan took a deep breath and looked at Li Yundong with a strange expression. Do you know how lucky you are? Li Yundong smiled dryly and said, It seems that my luck has always been good. Zi Yuan shook her head and said in disbelief, You've only been practicing Shintong for a few days, yet you dared to refine a powerful magical weapon into another powerful magical weapon. You're really bold. If it weren't for the fact that the fan of 7 treasures automatically protected its owner, and its Vajra Yang Qi just happened to restrain the ghostly Yin Qi of the 5-yang blood bead, not only would this powerful magical weapon have been destroyed, but you would also have been finished. Li Yundong looked aggrieved. Didn't you ask me to refine it? Zi Yuan said angrily, I asked you to refine it later, not now. Li Yundong smiled awkwardly and said, I misunderstood. Seeing that Zi Yuan was angry, he quickly changed the topic and asked, What did the Akalanatha say just now? What language was he speaking? Zi Yuan glanced at Li Yundong, as if she was helpless about this shameless guy. She sighed slightly and said, he was speaking Sanskrit. Li Yundong asked, what did he say? Why did the ghostly aura run to the psychic fan of 7 treasures after he finished speaking? Zi Yuan said, he said, those who see my body will have a Bodhi heart, those who hear my name will cut off evil and cultivate good, those who hear my dharma will have great wisdom, and those who know my heart will become Buddha. Li Yundong thought of the Buddhist classics he had read and suddenly understood. I see, this is the vow of the Akalanatha. Zi Yuan nodded and said, it's also the incantation of the Akalanatha to subdue demons. By chance, you have refined the ghost chi of the 5 yang blood pearl into the fan of 7 treasures. It can be said that you are an anomaly among anomalies. Others would never have thought that your fan of 7 treasures, which is full of yang chi and majestic and solemn, actually has such evil and vicious spiritual power. If the other party comes to steal your magical item, they will definitely suffer a great loss. Li Yundong laughed and said, this is called good people will be rewarded, and good people will be blessed. Seeing his frivolous and arrogant smile, Zi Yuan couldn't help but say with a smile, I think you are a villain who has achieved success. Li Yundong grinned and winked at Zi Yuan. Are you jealous of me? Zi Yuan spat and said, you are the fastest cultivator in the world, and you are also the most thick-skinned one. Li Yundong cupped his hands shamelessly and said with a smile, thank you for the compliment. Zi Yuan shook her head with a smile and said, I won't talk to you anymore. I just heard that something was wrong here, so I flew over to have a look. Before you reach the Yuanying phase, don't easily refine a magical item. Otherwise, the consequences will be unpredictable. This kind of thing can't happen again, but it can't happen a 3rd time. You must remember this. She told him a few words and then flew back to her home. Li Yundong recalled what had happened before at home, calculating the gains and losses in his heart. Thinking of the danger, he suddenly thought, if it weren't for the fan of 7 treasures in my hand, wouldn't I have been dead just now? Li Yundong calmed down. Thinking of this, he felt cold sweat all over his body, and he felt a burst of fear in his heart. With a look of fear on his face, he took a few deep breaths and adjusted his chi. Only then did the fear in his heart slowly dissipate. Li Yundong looked around the living room and couldn't help smiling bitterly. Cultivation is really a very expensive thing. Just this burnt sofa alone costs thousands of yuan. I'm going to lose money again. I have to find a way to make money as soon as possible. But how do I get started? Chapter 242. Go to Watch Network. Li Yundong thought for a while about how to make a fortune, but he still couldn't figure it out. He stopped thinking about it and sat cross-legged in the living room to practice chi all night. The next morning, he packed a few meals in a lunchbox, then took the fan of 7 treasures to the hospital to visit Zhou Qin. Watch Net. When he arrived at the hospital and walked to the inpatient building, he was about to enter the gate when he suddenly felt an object fall from the sky. He subconsciously raised his hand to catch it and felt something soft. When he looked closely, he saw that it was a pillow. Li Yundong looked up and saw Zhou Qin looking at him from the railing with a sweet smile. Li Yundong couldn't help but laugh. He raised the pillow in his hand and said, "Hey, is this how you welcome me?" Zhou Qin obviously seemed to be in a good mood. She smiled playfully and said, "I accidentally fell down. Bring it up for me." Of course, Li Yundong didn't believe that the pillow had fallen down. He smiled and shook his head, then walked into the building with the pillow. When he arrived at the ward, he saw that Zhou Qin was already at the door, sitting in a wheelchair and looking at him with a sweet smile. Li Yundong smiled and said, "You seem to be in a good mood today." Zhou Qin smiled and said, "Yes, I see a big fool. Of course I'm in a good mood." Li Yundong pretended to be angry and glared at Zhou Qin. "I came to see you with good intentions, but you actually mocked me. Zhou Qin's eyes twinkled. She pursed her lips and smiled. I'm not talking about you. What are you so excited about? Li Yundong smiled and didn't argue with her. It seems that what happened yesterday didn't affect you. What on earth made you so happy? Also, how did you know I was coming? How long have you been waiting on the balcony? Zhou Qin waved at Li Yundong and pushed the wheelchair to the bedside. She turned the notebook on the bed and said, "Come and see." Li Yundong leaned over to take a look and saw that it was the school forum of Tiannan University. At a glance, it was full of gossip posts from last night's welcome party. 9 out of 10 posts were talking about him, and the titles were colorful and colorful. Li Yundong thought to himself. An old and a young couple, a new explanation of the legend of the sword and fairy, the social problems reflected by Zhao Linger's pursuit of the sword saint, Li Xiaoyao, you're a man without a house, a car, or a career. How can I love you? Li Yundong was dumbfounded. F***ck, these B** stards are really good at messing around. What kind of nonsense is this? Zhou Qin giggled and said, the posts here are so funny. There are all kinds of things. Watch net. 7 KOM. Li Yundong, don't think that you're the only badass student in Tiannan University. There are a lot of powerful people here. Li Yundong nodded quickly and said with a speechless expression, yes, there is always a higher mountain and a higher cow. The two of them chatted and laughed for a while. Li Yundong looked at the posts on the forum for a while and said with a smile, forget it, I don't want to read it. These people are too free. Shall we continue with the massage? Zhou Qin smiled and said, okay. Li Yundong thought to himself, it's really strange that you didn't respond at all to the last 2 massages. This time, I might as well massage directly near the wound. He said, don't go out today. Lie down and I'll massage your back. Zhou Qin was stunned for a moment. She suddenly said shyly, do I have to do it through clothes? Li Yundong suddenly thought of Xuanqi and ambiguous last time. He coughed dryly and said seriously, benefactor, I don't have the ability to treat wounds through clothes, so I have to offend you. Zhou Qin's cheeks were red. She giggled and said, are you an eminent monk or a lewd one? Li Yundong had never flirted with Zhou Qin before. At this time, he was teased by such a beautiful woman in front of him. Even though he had a firm mind, he couldn't bear it. He coughed dryly with a straight face and didn't dare to answer. Hurry up, get on the bed. Zhou Qin also rarely saw Li Yundong so embarrassed. She couldn't help blushing again and teasing him with a smile. Then you have to carry me to bed. Li Yundong took a deep breath and thought to himself, oh my god, what's wrong with this girl today? She's usually a very noble and proud girl. How could there be signs of becoming a pervert? Li Yundong coughed dryly and bent down. He put one hand under Zhou Qin's knees, and the other hand passed through her back and picked her up. This hug could be said to be like holding a fragrant jade in his arms. The beauty's breath was like orchids. Li Yundong didn't dare to look at her directly. He just put Zhou Qin on the bed without looking sideways. Zhou Qin looked at Li Yundong with some hidden bitterness in her heart. She lay on the bed and turned her head. Is this okay? Li Yundong saw that although Zhou Qin was wearing a loose white hospital gown, the curve of her figure was still exquisite, especially the curve of her buttocks, which were high like hills and mountains. Although her skin was not exposed, the curve was enough to make people's hearts beat faster. Go to the internet. Ever since Su Chan had appeared in his life, Li Yundong had been used to seeing all kinds of beautiful women. But at this time, he suddenly felt that Zhou Qin, the sickly beauty, had a different kind of charm. The hidden bitterness in her eyes made his heart beat wildly. Li Yundong took a deep breath and said in a low voice, it's not that I'm not determined, it's that the beauty is too beautiful. After reciting it a few times, Li Yundong felt as if he had been hypnotized, and his expression actually calmed down. Zhou Qin was angry and amused. She bit her lip and looked at Li Yundong with hidden bitterness, thinking that she should make some trouble for him, but Li Yundong's hand had already pressed on her back. This was the first time that a boy had touched her skin. As soon as Li Yundong's fingertips touched her smooth jade-like skin, Zhou Qin suddenly felt as if an electric current had passed through her body. Her body trembled slightly and she let out a soft cry. This charming and flirtatious voice could really move Lu Xiaohui's heart. Even Lu Xiaohui wanted to regain his masculinity. Li Yundong's Taoist heart was almost broken. He suddenly broke out in a sweat and pretended to be angry. He glared at Zhou Qin and said, "What are you shouting for?" Zhou Qin looked back at him with grievance and resentment. The look in her eyes could even refine Vajra Arhat. Li Yundong shouted in his heart, "Amitba, no wonder the ancients said that beauty is a bone-scraping knife. This girl is trying to make me go crazy." After glancing at Li Yundong, Zhou Qin hugged the pillow and bit it hard with her teeth. She stared at Li Yundong with a pair of eyes that could speak, like a delicate willow that could not withstand the wind and rain. Li Yundong took a deep breath. He rubbed his temples and said with a wry smile, "Come on, you'd better shout as much as you want. Don't look at me like that. I can't stand it." Zhou Qin burst into laughter, buried her face in the pillow, and said in a muffled voice, "Hurry up. It won't be good if my father comes back and sees you." Li Yundong pressed his hand on the Shinshu and Qihai acupoints on Zhou Qin's back, gently transferring Yuanyang genuine qi. He said with a wry smile, "He won't shoot me, will he?" Zhou Qin giggled and said, "That's hard to say. My father hates you." As she said this, she thought to herself, "How can he not hate you? You made him lose his official position, and his precious daughter was stolen." Thinking of this, Zhou Qin felt shy and sweet for a moment. She thought of how Li Yundong had stood up to protect her last night, and how he had been taking care of her every day these days. She felt that she was the happiest person in the world. Zhou Qin let out a groan and hid her face in the pillow. Her ears were red with shame. After a while, she saw that there was no movement, so she quietly peeked at Li Yundong. However, Li Yundong's face was serious. His eyes were slightly closed, and his expression was focused, as if he was thinking about something. Zhou Qin couldn't help feeling a little disappointed. She turned her face sideways and looked at the boy intently while Li Yundong was lost in thought. There was no reason to talk about love. In the past, Zhou Qin's yearning for Li Yundong had been very complicated. There was a yearning for the mysterious power in his body, a rebellion in adolescence, and also a love for Li Yundong. But now, Zhou Qin felt that she simply liked this boy. She liked his eyes, his eyebrows, his lips, and everything about him. Even if he lost his strength and she lost her extraordinary family background, it didn't matter. As long as she could see him every day and talk to him for a while, she would be very satisfied. While Zhou Qin was looking at Li Yundong in a daze, she suddenly saw a few people coming in from the corner of her eye. It was her father, Zhou Kachang, and two doctors. In the middle of them was a silver-haired middle-aged man. He lowered his head and was looking at the medical records and X-ray photos in his hands. The two doctors were talking to the middle-aged man in a low voice with a fawning look on their faces. It was as if they wanted to stick their faces to his buttocks. Even Zhou Kachang was faintly fawning over the silver-haired middle-aged man. As soon as they entered the ward, Zhou Kachang was stunned. The other two doctors were also stunned. They saw a young man putting his hand into Zhou Qin's clothes. Zhou Qin's eyes were full of lust, and her cheeks were flushed. Even a blind man could see that she was in love. Zhou Kachang was furious. ***, even if you want to do something with my daughter, can't you choose a good place? Why are you so eager? The other two doctors also frowned and shouted, "Hey, what are you doing? This is a ward, a hospital. Do you think it's a hotel sauna? This sentence was a little inappropriate. It seemed to imply that Zhou Qin was a mistress. Zhou Kachang glanced at them unhappily, but he was already an ordinary person. Even if he was angry, he couldn't lose his temper, so he had to suppress his unhappiness in his heart. The silver-haired middle-aged man also frowned slightly, but when his eyes fell on Zhou Qin, he was immediately shocked. For a moment, there was greed and amazement in his eyes. When Zhou Qin was alone with Li Yundong, she would show some of the demeanor of a little girl, but once there was an outsider, her arrogant temperament and domineering temper returned to her body. She glanced coldly at the silver-haired middle-aged man, frowned, and said, "What nonsense are you talking about? He is my classmate, and he is treating my illness." The two doctors thought that Li Yundong and Zhou Qin were doing something shameful in the ward. They were shocked by Zhou Qin's beauty and jealous of Li Yundong's luck with women. At the same time, they felt that the hospital had been tarnished and offended, so naturally, they spoke very rudely. One of the doctors sneered and said, "Treating a patient. Is this how you treat a patient? Who does he think he is? How can he treat a patient here?" The other doctor also snorted and said, "He hasn't even graduated from college. How dare he mess around here? Hey, what's your major? Do you know what her illness is? Do you know that messing around will cause people to die?" Li Yundong turned around and carefully looked at these people. His eyes fell on the silver-haired middle-aged man in the lead. He reached out his hand and said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "Are you Zhou Qin's attending doctor?" "Hello, I'm Li Yundong." The middle-aged man had an arrogant look on his face. He stretched out his hand indifferently, and his posture was condescending. He shook hands with Li Yundong as if he was giving alms. He said leisurely, "Are you a medical student?" Li Yundong shook his head and said, "No." The middle-aged man snorted and coldly snorted, "Then I'll have to say a few words to you. Young man, don't be so arrogant. You don't know anything and yet you dare to mess around." Li Yundong frowned secretly and asked, "And you are?" The doctor next to him rushed to say, "This is Zhong Guofang, a well-known expert in neurovascular and oncology in our country." Expert? The expression on Li Yundong's face suddenly became strange. He thought to himself, isn't the title of expert now used to curse people? Last week, he ranked 9th on the flower list. This week, he broke out twice, on Tuesday and Saturday. Chapter 243. Go to watch net. Li Yundong had always shown limited respect for experts and scholars. He looked up and down at the neurology and oncology expert and saw that the man was not very tall, about 1.7 meters. He had silver hair, a slightly bald forehead, an oily face, and a fat belly. It was obvious that he ate a lot on weekdays and had tumors all over his body. No wonder he could become an oncology expert. A long illness makes a good doctor. Zhong Guofang glanced at Li Yunyang and snorted inwardly. He was used to seeing people with awe and worship when they heard his name, especially those patients. When they saw him, it was as if they were seeing Buddha or Guanyin Bodhisattva. Watch net. 7 KOM. However, the temperament of the boy in front of him made him very uncomfortable. Although the boy looked young, his temperament was very calm. Seeing these people enter the ward and catch him doing something he shouldn't do, he didn't panic at all. Instead, he was calm and composed, looking at them calmly as if he was the attending doctor of this stunning beauty. Zhong Guofang was very disgusted with the feeling of turning against the host and being the guest. Even officials had to be polite to him. After all, no matter how high an official was, who wouldn't get sick? Didn't they still have to beg experts and scholars when they got sick? He was used to being fawned over. Today, he suddenly met Li Yundong, who not only did not fawn over him, but also looked him up and down with a questioning gaze. Naturally, he felt very unhappy. Zhong Guofang no longer looked at Li Yundong. He turned his face and looked at Zhou Qin with a kind expression, asking about her condition. However, Zhou Qin didn't have a good expression on her face. She was just lukewarm and indifferent, talking non-committally. Li Yundong ignored the supercilious looks of the two doctors next to him and listened carefully to the conversation between Zhong Guofang and Zhou Qin. When he heard Zhong Guofang say, "I've seen your radiographic films. I think you'll need surgery, but there's currently no such technology in the country," as soon as Li Yundong heard the word operation, he felt like his butt was on fire. He shouted, "Don't do it." Li Yundong knew that during the Three Kingdoms period, Hua Tuo also had the skills to perform surgery. However, according to the theory of traditional Chinese medicine, surgery was absolutely not encouraged unless it was a last resort. Watch net. When Western doctors performed surgery, they would sometimes make a horizontal incision in order to leave a smaller scar during the suture. This incision could sever one or even several meridians, no matter if it was on the body, back, limbs, or any other place. There were 8 extra meridians in the human body, and 12 in the hands and feet. If Zhou Qin's back was cut horizontally, the governor meridian near the spine would definitely be destroyed. The foot Taiyang bladder meridian and foot Shaoyin kidney meridian would also be cut off. Even if it was a vertical cut, the governing vessel would be cut open. Zhong Guofang and the two doctors turned to look at Li Yundong. Zhong Guofang's eyes were filled with mockery and disdain. "What do you think?" A doctor said impatiently, "What do you know? Don't interrupt if you don't know anything." Li Yundong suppressed the displeasure in his heart and said, "The human body is a big furnace. We usually have to hide our yuanqi well, so we pay attention to not talking when we eat, not talking when we sleep, and not talking when we sleep. If you cut her with a knife, not only will you cut open the furnace, but you will also cut off her governing meridian, causing more than half of the yuanqi in her body to run away. Are you saving her or harming her? Even if the tumor can be removed and the extravasated blood can be cleaned, once the governing vessel is severed, it can never be restored." When Zhong Guofang heard that, he turned around and looked Li Yundong up and down again. "You've studied Chinese medicine before?" Li Yundong said in a low voice, "A little." A doctor on the side laughed and said, "Do you still believe in this kind of thing in this day and age? Why don't you buy some talisman water for her to drink?" "That's right, the rotten wood in the coffin and the blood from a woman's menstrual cycle. Aren't those things used in traditional Chinese medicine? Good stuff." The other doctor also laughed out loud. Watch net. 7 KOM. Li Yundong knew that traditional Chinese medicine and Western medicine were at odds with each other. However, it was the first time that he had seen someone who studied Western medicine slander traditional Chinese medicine. He was furious and retorted rudely, "Is your understanding of traditional Chinese medicine so shallow?" The doctor who had mocked him snorted and said, "Oh. What kind of profound understanding do you have? Tell me." Li Yundong walked up to Zhou Qin, suppressed his anger, and said, "The tumor and extravasated blood in Zhou Qin's body can be evacuated by the method of qi circulation. It can also be dredged by acupuncture. There's no need for surgery at all." The doctor laughed and said, "Qi circulation? Do you think you're a Qigong master? Come on, Qigong masters have been arrested now, okay? Even Li Yi, who was rumored to be evil a while ago, has been arrested. Don't you know?" Zhong Guofang, who had been watching Li Yundong coldly, also took the opportunity to teach Li Yundong a lesson. "Young man, history and facts have proven countless times that all the Qigong masters and health masters who have been advocating everywhere can't stand the test of time and are proven to be big liars. Why has traditional Chinese medicine declined? The root cause is that it's not scientific. It's pseudoscience. If you want to study medicine, I can recommend you to study at the top medical schools abroad." Li Yundong was furious when he heard this. All the theoretical foundations of cultivation and the source of everything originated from the theories of traditional Chinese medicine. In other words, they all originated from the supreme treasure of the cultivation world, China's first medical work, the Yellow Emperor's Canon of Internal Medicine. It was on the basis of this book that the various sects of cultivation and other medical works came into being. For example, the peerless cultivation work written by the great grandmaster of the Danding sect, Gu Hong, also contained a large number of medical monographs. Cultivation and traditional Chinese medicine were inseparable. Those who knew cultivation understood traditional Chinese medicine, and those who knew traditional Chinese medicine understood cultivation. This was the so-called 10 ways and 9 doctors. However, Zhong Guofang's words completely denied traditional Chinese medicine, which was tantamount to cutting off the foundation of cultivation and denying cultivation. What was the difference between this and digging up people's ancestral graves? As a cultivator, how could Li Yundong tolerate such a thing? Li Yundong was angry, so he flew into a rage. He looked at Zhong Guofang coldly and then said to Zhou Qin, "Do you have a mirror?" Seeing the anger in Li Yundong's eyes, Zhou Qin immediately took out a dressing box from under the pillow beside her and gave it to him. "There's a mirror in it." Li Yundong didn't stand on ceremony. He grabbed the dressing box, opened it, and faced the mirror at Zhong Guofang. He said angrily, "Look at your eyes. Do you know that your eyes are cloudy and your eyes are deep?" "What do you mean by that?" "Let me tell you, the eyes belong to the liver. This is a sign that your liver is seriously damaged. You must not sleep on time, eat on time, and drink alcohol." Li Yundong didn't wait for Zhong Guofang to refute. He pointed at Zhong Guofang's hair and said, "Look at your hair. How old are you this year? Looking at your face, you're definitely not over 60 years old, but your hair is so white. Do you really think you're an immortal with white hair and a youthful face? Let me tell you, the quality of your hair depends on your kidneys. If you're in your 50s and your hair is white like this, there's probably something wrong with your kidneys." Zhong Guofang was stunned by Li Yundong's words. Before he could react, he saw Li Yundong pull his shoulder with a finger and turn his back to him. The 2 doctors next to him immediately shouted, "Hey, what are you doing? A gentleman uses his mouth, not his fists." Li Yundong turned his head and glared at them. "Shut up." The 2 doctors only felt a threatening aura coming at them, so frightened that they sat down on the hospital bed next to them. They wanted to say something, but their mouths opened and closed, unable to say a word. Zhong Guofang was already dumbfounded at this time. He only felt that Li Yundong's 2 hands were pressing on his waist and kidneys. Immediately, a feeling of soreness and numbness surged up, and he couldn't help but cry out. Li Yundong sneered and said, "Humph, sore and numb, right? Do you know why? You have a kidney deficiency, a big loss. Do you have tinnitus from time to time at night? The ear belongs to the kidney, and tinnitus means that there's something wrong with your kidney. Look at you, you're fat all over, and it's obvious that you have a lot of meals and drinks, so your liver is damaged." As he said this, Li Yundong grabbed Zhong Guofang's wrist again and felt his pulse. Then he reached out to pinch Zhong Guofang's cheek, forcing him to open his mouth. He glanced at his tongue and sneered, "The liver and kidney are the inside and outside of each other. Your liver is not good, and you often stay up late, so it will definitely affect your other internal organs. Moreover, your pulse is heavy, smooth, and weak, and your tongue is light, fat, and white. This is a typical symptom of kidney yang deficiency. You must like women, and you must have excessive sex. With your age and body, you like women so much, and you want to save face so much. There must be a lot of tiger and wolf medicine." Li Yundong's words were like a needle, and every word fiercely pierced the expert's heart. "It's a disease of kidney yang deficiency, but you still covet beauty and use tiger and wolf medicine. Let me tell you, you will die in less than 5 years." After this sentence, the whole ward fell silent for a moment. Zhong Guofang's face was ashen, and his whole body was trembling with anger. He pointed at Li Yundong, and his hand kept trembling. He kept saying you, but he couldn't say anything else. Deep in his heart, he was extremely frightened, because Li Yundong had turned over all his secrets in an instant, and every word had hit his sore spot. The other two doctors looked at Zhong Guofang's expression and looked at each other. Although they didn't say anything, they knew in their hearts that the boy had probably hit Zhong Guofang's weak spot. For a moment, they couldn't help but feel guilty. They subconsciously reached out to touch their hair, and then touched the position of their waist and kidneys, muttering in their hearts, being a doctor is a lot of pressure, and there are a lot of social engagements. There must be some sex to vent. Recently, a lot of white hair has grown, and my two kidneys often feel numb and weak. Is it also kidney yang deficiency? == 3:00 tomorrow. Chapter 244. Go to see net. Since the end of the Qing dynasty, Western medicine and traditional Chinese medicine had become enemies. Western medicine regarded traditional Chinese medicine as pseudoscience. Many Chinese who studied Western medicine would rather die of illness than take a sip of traditional Chinese medicine, as if doing so could prove that they were on the side of science and were noble and great. Go to see net. Zhong Guofang and the two doctors denounced traditional Chinese medicine as pseudoscience, but Li Yundong's words were like a sharp needle, stabbing into their vitals. They had no choice but to believe it. Although they were muttering in their hearts, they still didn't believe Li Yundong. After all, when a duck was cooked, its mouth was still rotten. Zhong Guofang, who had been rendered speechless by Li Yundong's words, suddenly blushed and shouted, "You're talking nonsense and slandering me. What's your name? I'm going to sue you for slander." Li Yundong sneered, "Sue me for slander? How did I slander you?" One of the doctors next to him came to his senses. This is not a joke. If the news that Zhong Guofang was reprimanded by a young man gets out, it's not a big deal for him, but it's a big deal for the hospital. He's an outpatient specialist specially hired by the hospital. If that happens, won't the director take out his anger on them? The doctor immediately pointed at Li Yundong and said loudly, "Do you have any evidence to prove that what you just said is right?" Li Yundong heard this, squinted at him, and sneered, "Evidence? The evidence is all on his face. Can't you see it for yourself?" The doctor shouted, "Where? Why can't I see it?" Li Yundong saw that the doctor was starting to pester endlessly and lie through his teeth. He sneered and said, "Yes, of course you can't see it. You only have money and power in your eyes. How can you see the illness? You can tell me whether I'm sick or not." The doctor was so angry that his face turned red. Where did this little bastard come from? He's so uneducated. Li Yundong said angrily, "Who are you cursing?" The doctor also said angrily, "The little bastard cursed you." Li Yundong nodded and laughed. "Yes, the little bastard cursed me." Zhou Qin had been watching anxiously as Li Yundong and the others quarreled with each other. But when she heard what Li Yundong said, she burst into laughter. She suddenly remembered the scene when Li Yundong and Lu Chuan were quarreling in the classroom. She couldn't help thinking, "I thought this boy had grown up a lot, but I didn't expect him to still be a little boy in his heart. How cute." Girls who fell into the trap of love were unreasonable. Zhou Qin thought that Li Yundong was brave and heroic even when he was quarreling. She looked at him with interest, wishing that she could cheer for him from the side. Watch net. 7:KOM. Color asterisk caret and text learn % super hashtag speed. Update. The doctor accidentally fell into Li Yundong's trap. He was suddenly stunned and looked at Li Yundong angrily. He wanted to take off his clothes, roll up his sleeves, and fight with him. Zhong Guofang slowly came back to his senses. He took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "Little friend, you must speak objectively and based on facts. You speak irresponsibly without any basis. Isn't that slander?" Zhong Guofang's words were righteous, and his face was even more awe-inspiring. Li Yundong sneered in his heart. What basis? Why did traditional Chinese medicine decline? It was very simple. Because it was a subjective knowledge. Almost all diagnoses came from human judgment. Western medicine could determine a person's illness through a variety of instruments, but traditional Chinese medicine could hardly produce an intuitive result like X-ray. Western medicine could take an X-ray and say that you were sick. This was an objective fact. But what about traditional Chinese medicine? That was what people said. I'm sick just because you say I'm sick. I won't admit it. What can you do to me? Li Yundong looked at Zhong Guofang's righteous face, but there was a trace of hooliganism in his bones. He felt a surge of anger rush to his chest and choke in his throat. He couldn't swallow it no matter how hard he tried. Zhou Keqiang, who was standing to one side, began to smooth things over. He said, "Li Yundong, I know you have good intentions, but Qin's illness can't be messed around, and she can't do whatever she wants. I think it's better to let Dr. Zhong treat her." Li Yundong glanced at him and said, "Uncle Zhou, you don't believe that I can cure Qin's illness?" Zhou Keqiang was choked by Li Yundong's words and couldn't speak. A doctor next to him sneered and said, "You can cure her illness? Apart from other things, do you have a medical license? Do you have a medical qualification?" Another doctor also said, "Let me tell you, if you can cure her illness, our hospital can close down. You can be a doctor in the future." Zhong Guofang also joined the army of condemnation and said righteously, "Little friend, seeing a doctor is not something that can be done by reading a few books. Don't make trouble here. It's better to go back to school and learn more." Seeing that these people were besieging him, Li Yundong took a deep breath and calmed down. He turned his head to look at Zhou Qin and said in a deep voice, "Let her choose for herself." "Zhou Qin, who do you want to treat her?" Zhou Qin said without hesitation, "Is there a need to ask? Of course it's you. I don't trust these fellows." Her words made Zhong Guofang and the two doctors' faces suddenly turn red. Zhong Guofang said angrily, "You're really unreasonable." Then, he flicked his sleeves and was about to leave. Go to the internet. Color. Text. Learn. Net. Super_speed. More. New. Zhou Keqiang quickly smiled and said, "Dr. Zhong, don't be angry. The children are not sensible. Don't lower yourself to their level." As he said this, he turned his head and glared at Zhou Qin. Qin, apologize now." Zhou Qin sneered and said, "Dad, are you kidding me? Why should I apologize to them? Am I wrong?" Seeing that his precious daughter was losing her temper again, Zhou Keqiang couldn't help but say, Qin, no matter what, they are here to treat your illness." Zhou Qin stopped talking. She whispered in her heart, "I've been cured for a long time." Li Yundong said from the side, "Uncle Zhou, if you believe me, I can cure Zhou Qin's illness in less than 2 days. There's no need for surgery at all." Zhong Guofang laughed out loud. Every quack doctor who sells dog-skin plaster deceives their patients like this. They take advantage of the patient's eagerness to recuperate and deceive the patient by saying that they can quickly cure their illness. In fact, it's all a lie. In her situation, let alone 2 days, she may not be able to recover in 2 years. The doctor next to him also sneered and said, "Humph, she still has to cooperate with the treatment. Otherwise, she won't be able to stand up for the rest of her life." Li Yundong's heart was full of anger. He suppressed his anger and said, "What if I can cure her?" Another doctor said sarcastically, "If you can cure her, then I'll jump from here. You really know how to brag at such a young age." How dare you say such a thing when even the top experts in the country don't dare to guarantee it? You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Li Yundong was furious. Just as he was about to speak, he saw Zhou Qin suddenly raise her eyebrows and sneer. What did you just say? The doctor said without hesitation. I said, if he can cure this disease, I'll jump from here. Zhou Qin snorted angrily. She could stand Ding Nan humiliating herself in front of everyone, but she couldn't stand others humiliating Li Yundong in front of her. Zhou Qin lifted the bed sheet and moved her body to the side of the bed. She gritted her teeth and was about to stand up. Zhou Keqiang was so scared that his face turned ashen. Qin, what are you going to do? Don't get excited. Zhou Qin stretched out a hand and stopped Zhou Keqiang, who was about to come over to help her. She hesitated for a moment and thought to herself, if Li Yundong knows that I've recovered, will he ignore me? But this thought just flashed through her mind. Zhou Qin still gritted her teeth and stood up. As soon as her feet touched the ground, the eyes of the people around her immediately fell on her feet. Li Yundong was ready to support her. Zhou Keqiang, who was next to him, was also so nervous that his forehead was covered with sweat. Zhou Qin smiled at Li Yundong, then slowly straightened her back. She took a deep breath and said provocatively to the two doctors and Zhong Guofang, how is it? I'm all right now. The eyes of the two doctors were about to fall out of their sockets. They pointed at Zhou Qin and stammered, how can you stand up? Zhong Guofang also looked at Zhou Qin with his mouth agape, as if he couldn't believe his eyes. How is this possible? Zhou Qin pointed at Li Yundong and sneered. Do you know why I can stand up? It's because he comes to massage me every day to dredge my blood vessels, so I can get better. Zhong Guofang cried out involuntarily, impossible, it can't be so fast. It's only been a few days. This is absolutely impossible. As he said this, he turned his head and shouted at the two doctors, did you show me the wrong X-ray? One of the doctors didn't react and just stared at Zhou Qin in a daze. The other doctor reacted quickly and said loudly, yes, you must have taken the wrong X-ray. After he shouted, the doctor next to him also reacted and said loudly, what a miracle. You can actually recover by yourself. Zhou Qin saw that they were all shameless and refused to admit that it was Li Yundong who had done it. She couldn't help but fly into a rage. She pointed at Zhong Guofang and scolded, didn't you say that it would take 2 years for me to recover? Let me tell you, Li Yundong cured me in 2 days. He used the traditional Chinese medicine technique that you despise. As she said this, Zhou Qin pointed at the doctor who had said that he would jump off the building if he could cure her and said loudly, now I'm standing here fine. Do you remember what you said just now? I think you definitely don't remember. You dare to deny what you just said. I think it's better for you to end your life as soon as possible. I'll give you a silk banner with the words eliminate evil for the people written on it. Then you won't have lived in vain. Zhong Guofang and the two doctors were red in the face and speechless. They wanted to refute, but the truth was in front of them, so they couldn't say anything. Zhong Guofang's face turned purple. He snorted and walked away. Zhou Qin shouted behind him, hey, remember, don't just play with women in the future. Be careful. Zhong Guofang staggered and turned his head to look at Zhou Qin and Li Yundong with resentment in his eyes. Then, he quickly walked away. The remaining two doctors looked at each other and chased after him while shouting and yelling. Looking at their figures, Zhou Qin sneered and said, I don't think they have any real medical skills, but I think their ability to flatter is at the international level. Zhou Qin, a girl with unparalleled beauty, was really sharp when she got angry, attracting patients from other wards to watch the fun. An old lady who had chatted with Zhou Qin on weekdays couldn't help but ask, daughter of the Zhou family, what happened to make you so angry? As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly saw Zhou Qin standing on the ground. She cried out involuntarily, "You're all right. When did this happen? How did you recover so quickly?" Chapter 245. Go to watch net. Li Yundong had some doubts in his heart. Why did Zhou Qin suddenly get better? Why did she get better now? Why did she get better now? Moreover, when I gave her qi, I clearly felt that the extravasated blood in her body had been cleared, and the tumor had also dissipated. She should have gotten better yesterday or the day before. Why did she get better today? Go to watch net. 7 KOM. Color asterisk caret and when #% super #speed. But this thought just flashed through his mind. When Li Yundong saw an old lady who was dozens of years older than him kneeling in front of him, he suddenly panicked. He didn't have time to think about other things and hurriedly went over to help her up. "Grandma, please get up. I can't afford to be bowed to by you." Old Lady Su was short and wore a blue shirt. She looked very thin and wore a pair of cloth shoes. She said stubbornly, "Little magic doctor, if you promise me that you'll take a look at me, I'll get up." Li Yundong smiled bitterly. Okay, I'll help you." Although Zhou Keqiang saw that Zhou Qin really stood up, this kind of thing was too incredible. It was almost like a demon. He couldn't believe that Li Yundong had cured Zhou Qin's illness. Moreover, as a senior official in the system, atheism had long taken root in the depths of his mind. How could he believe that there was a doctor in the world who could cure Zhou Qin's illness in 2 or 3 days? If there really was such a person, wouldn't he be like a living immortal? Zhou Keqiang looked at Li Yundong suspiciously, wanting to see how this young man would treat the disease. At this time, patients from other wards and some nurses and head nurses who were curious to see what was going to happen all squeezed over, filling the room. All pairs of eyes were staring at Li Yundong. Li Yundong was used to big scenes, so he didn't take these people seriously. He helped old lady Su up and let her sit on a chair. He helped her check her pulse and then asked about the situation. Although Li Yundong had cured Zhou Qin, it was because the method was correct, so the effect was very fast. But if he really became a magic doctor, even Li Yundong himself didn't believe it. If one could become a doctor just by reading a few medical books and be able to treat all kinds of illnesses, then TCM would have long spread all over the world. How could Western medicine bully them? At first, Li Yundong was inevitably a little nervous, but when he felt old lady Su's pulse, he used his Jinqi to explore her body and quickly scanned her meridians and internal organs. He immediately knew what was going on. He smiled and said, "Old lady, if I'm right, you often feel very tired, don't you?" Old lady Su was taken aback. "Yes, how did you know? Do your knees, ankles, and arms suffer from rheumatism whenever it rains?" Li Yundong smiled again. "Do you have rheumatism in your knees, ankles, and arms?" Old lady Su looked surprised. "Hey, you're really the little miracle-working doctor. I didn't call you wrong. How did you know?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "You probably broke your left arm when you were young, right?" Old Madame Su slapped her thigh hard and said loudly, "Amazing, it's really amazing. How did you know?" As she spoke, she suddenly realized that her words were a little disrespectful. She immediately smiled and said, "Oh, I'm an old woman. Don't take it to heart." Li Yundong chuckled and continued to ask, "In the past few days in the hospital, did you often have diarrhea after eating?" Old lady Su's mouth was wide open. She stared at Li Yundong, speechless for a moment. Go to the internet. 7 KOM. The people around them also looked at them and whispered to each other. Someone whispered, "This young man seems to have some skills." The people around them also looked at them and whispered to each other. Someone whispered, "This young man seems to have some tricks up his sleeve." Some people with ulterior motives also looked at them and whispered to each other, "Hey, this young man seems to have some skills. Some people with ulterior motives said, "Hey, are you looking for a doctor or a fortune teller?" Li Yundong ignored them and said to Old Lady Su with a smile, "You must find it incredible. Why do I know so much about you? I have inquired about you, haven't I?" Old Lady Su nodded vigorously, like a chicken pecking rice. "Yes, yes, how did you know?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "I asked you if you were very tired at first because I found that your 2 kidneys were almost dried up, and you were already very old. The kidneys are the source of a person's strength. If the kidneys are not strong, the person will have no strength and will often be listless and weak. Therefore, I deduced that you must often have no strength and get tired easily. In addition, your knees, ankles, and arms have accumulated dampness over a long period of time. This is the result of not paying attention when you were young, and I found that the dampness on your left arm is especially serious. Dampness usually gathers at the joints of the human body's bones and meridians, or at the wounds. Most of the time, it stays near the joints of the human body, but if a person is injured, it will gather there. Your elbow was broken, so the dampness stayed at the wound. If we don't find a way to get rid of the dampness, it will accumulate more and more. So when it rains, you will definitely suffer from rheumatism and abnormal pain, right?" Li Yundong said with a smile. "That's right. Go to the internet." 7ko-Granny Su exclaimed, clapped her hands hard, and said loudly, "I admire you. I believe that you are the real miracle-working doctor. However, you said that I sometimes have diarrhea after eating for the past few days. How could you tell? When I felt your pulse just now, I found that your spleen is not very good." The spleen was the main butler of the human body. "I was really admitted to the hospital because of high blood pressure." "Amazing, you are so amazing." The people around suddenly burst into an uproar, and they all began to chatter, "Wow, it's really amazing. You know what disease it is with just a glance and a touch." Some people subconsciously felt their own pulse, but no matter how they felt, they could only feel their pulse jumping up and down. They couldn't feel anything at all. They couldn't help but wonder, how did he feel it? Why can't I feel anything? Someone next to him immediately made fun of him and said, "If you could feel it, would you be admitted to this hospital?" Someone sighed and said, "Look at this boy, how can he be so amazing at such a young age?" There were also people who were jealous and said sourly, "After saying so much, he still hasn't said how to treat it. What's the use of just looking but not treating it?" While they were chattering, Li Yundong smiled and spoke again. His voice was not loud, but it was strong and magnetic. No matter how hard they tried, they could not suppress the boy's voice. They could still hear the boy's voice clearly. As soon as Li Yundong opened his mouth, these people quieted down again and listened to him quietly. Li Yundong said, "I just said so much. Old lady, you must want to know what I can do to help you cure it, right?" Seeing Li Yundong's smiling face, Old Lady Su was obviously confident. She couldn't help but be surprised and happy. "Little magic doctor, do you have a way to cure me?" Li Yundong chuckled and said, "Although this kind of disease is an acute disease in the eyes of Western medicine, the treatment method of Western medicine is often to treat the symptoms but not the root cause. However, we Chinese medicine often trace back to the source. As long as your kidney is cured, even if the other diseases in your body can't be completely cured, they will definitely be much better than before." Li Yundong reached out his hand and said, "Excuse me." He pressed it on the old lady's head and said with a smile, "Now I'll show you the effect." As he said this, Li Yundong channeled the purest and most vigorous Yuanyang genuine qi in his body into Old Lady Su's body. Old Lady Su's body was like a hollow tree trunk. Her body was exhausted, and what she lacked the most was yuanqi. However, Li Yundong didn't lack yuanqi at all. He was like a rich man, plucking a strand of his hair and throwing it to Old Lady Su, a poor woman. Although he couldn't make her suddenly rich, at least he could make her no longer poor. Old Lady Sue only felt a warm current running down from the top of her head, as if someone had poured a basin of hot water over her head. The hot water flowed down her spine, and when it reached her waist, it suddenly forked and flowed to her two waists. At this time, Old Lady Sue felt that her two empty waists suddenly seemed to be filled with hot water, like two hot water bags, warm and rising, as if an exhausted dam had been filled with water again. After a while, the dam slowly opened the sluice and distributed water to all the dry parts of her body according to the needs of her body. This heat rushed to all parts of Old Lady Sue's body, and some of the rheumatism that had accumulated in the past was also expelled. Everyone around saw Li Yundong press the top of Old Lady Sue's head. After a while, her face became ruddy. After a while, there was a faint white steam rising from the top of Old Lady Sue's head. After a while, someone was surprised to find that the wrinkles on Old Lady Sue's face seemed to have decreased a lot, and her originally dim yellow eyes also became clear and bright. After about a minute or two, Li Yundong let go of her hand and asked with a smile, "How do you feel?" "I just helped you expel all the moisture from your body." Old Lady Sue stood up in disbelief and looked at Li Yundong with her eyes wide open. She clenched her fists in disbelief and found that her strength was much greater than before. She tried to jump and found that her legs and feet were also strong. She shouted in shock, I feel as if I have become 10 years younger." The people around also looked at Old Lady Sue with their mouths agape. Even a blind man could see the change in Old Lady Sue. Just now, the old lady had been bent over and looked like she was in her 70s or 80s, but now she looked like she was in her 50s or 60s. Even if the people around had opinions about Li Yundong, they couldn't help but be speechless, because the facts spoke louder than words. In their eyes, Li Yundong knew Old Lady Sue's condition with just a look and a touch. In less than 2 minutes, he had made Old Lady Sue look like she had been rejuvenated and become more than 10 years younger. This kind of method was really no different from that of an immortal. Seeing the change in Old Lady Sue, they couldn't help but shout, little magic doctor, please take a look at me." As they spoke, they rushed toward Li Yundong like a tide. /OM/4527-894-1954 7 KOM 113 Learn for net. Although Zhou Qin covered her ears, she was still shaken to the point that the qi and blood in her chest were rolling, and she felt very uncomfortable. None of these people had expected that this young boy would be able to roar like a lion. They were stunned and looked at Li Yundong in awe, no longer daring to take the initiative to step forward. Li Yundong suddenly remembered what Zi Yuan had said, medicine carries the Tao, and martial arts defend the Tao. It was not enough to win the support of the world with medical skills. One had to have enough strength to make them fear so that they would be obedient. Thinking of this, Li Yundong couldn't help nodding to himself. It was not enough to be kind and virtuous. One had to have thunderous means to make people awe and not dare to offend him. Otherwise, the world would think that he was weak and easy to bully and come to him one after another. After Li Yunyang calmed everyone down, he coughed dryly and said to the crowd, "Don't get excited, everyone. Take your time. No matter how powerful I am, I don't have 3 heads and 6 arms. It's impossible for me to take care of everything. If you squeeze like this, in the end, I can only run away. None of you will be able to treat the disease, right?" At this time, Old Lady Sue stood up and said loudly as the chief supporter, "Yes, the little immortal is right. Everyone, come one by one. I will maintain the order." When everyone saw this, they all laughed. Someone joked, "Old lady, you're missing a red armband on your arm." Old Lady Sue smiled and said, "What? Are you looking down on me? My son is from the **** team. If you're not convinced, I'll call him over." The person who spoke quickly waved his hand and said, I wouldn't dare. Everyone knows that in this world, privacy is the most important thing. Old Lady Sue raised her head and said, it's good that you know. Seeing this, everyone burst out laughing. Seeing that everyone had finally calmed down, Li Yundong also breathed a sigh of relief. He temporarily acted as a doctor, turning the ward into the lobby and acting as the doctor in charge. Watch Net. 7 KOM. The nurses and doctors outside looked at each other with strange expressions. When did the inpatient building become an outpatient department? What kind of scandal was this? But seeing that the people around them were all in high spirits and had excited expressions, they didn't dare to say anything more, for fear of offending the public. If they were beaten up, it would be a big joke. While Li Yundong was acting as a barefoot doctor in the People's Hospital of the city, Su Chan was anxiously waiting for the news of the paper crane in the Taoist temple of the Fox Zen School. It's been a few days. Why hasn't there been any news yet? Su Chan anxiously paced around her room like a headless fly. From time to time, she glanced at the window, as if she was hoping that the paper crane would fly in the next second. She kept pacing back and forth in the room, which annoyed Ao Wushuang. She frowned and said, Chaner, what's wrong with you? Is your butt on fire? Su Chan stood still, rolled her eyes, and said tentatively, Master, I want to. Ao Wushuang immediately said without thinking, no. Su Chan said with a bitter face, I haven't said what it is yet. Ao Wushuang sneered and said, don't you think I don't know how clever you are? Don't you just want to find Li Yundong? Su Chan's face suddenly fell. She pouted and looked unhappy. She knew in her heart that Ao Wushuang was right, but she refused to admit it. You're so annoying. That's not what I meant. Ao Wushuang glanced at her and said, then what do you mean? Su Chan rolled her eyes and said, I mean, I want to go out for a while. Ao Wushuang snorted coldly and said, what are you going to do? Su Chan smiled slyly and said, I lost the paper crane that Grandmaster Sect Leader gave me. I'm going to look for it. Ao Wushuang snorted and didn't want to talk nonsense with her. She flicked her sleeves and drove Su Chan into the room. Su Chan pushed the door and saw that it was tightly sealed. She stamped her feet and said angrily, Master, you've gone too far. Let me out. Ao Wushuang closed her eyes and ignored her. Su Chan couldn't help shouting, I'll climb the window and run away. Ao Wushuang said slowly, run away. If you run away, don't come back. Su Chan was exasperated. I'm really going to run away. As she said this, she moved and disappeared from the room in an instant. Ao Wushuang glanced sideways at the room where Su Chan was and said with a smile, naughty disciple, you're fighting with me again. You're addicted to it, aren't you? Just as she was about to stand up, she suddenly saw Mo Ashi walking over from the door. Ao Wushuang immediately got up and said respectfully, Eldest Shiji, what's the matter? Mo Ashi was still dressed in a Taoist robe with a golden hairpin in her hair. Her face was dignified and gentle, but her figure was graceful. She smiled and said, yesterday, I found a paper crane in the backyard. I don't know if you lost it here. When Ao Wushuang heard this, she couldn't help but glance at the room where Su Chan was and thought, oh, this girl can actually hold back. Didn't she say that she had lost a paper crane? Could it be that she really ran out? This B***starred girl is getting more and more outrageous. Ao Wushuang said with a smile, Eldest Shiji, you're so polite. You can just send someone else for such a small matter. Why did you come in person? Mo Ashi said with a smile, don't mention it. I haven't seen you for so long. It's good to come and walk around. As she said this, her eyes wandered around the room and she asked casually, by the way, where's my little niece? Ao Wushuang sighed and said, don't mention her. She quarreled with me, so she probably ran out. Mo Ashi chuckled and said, "Why did you quarrel with her? Is there something you can't deal with?" Ao Wushuang waved her hand and said, "Every family has its own problems. Don't mention it." Mo Ashi smiled and said, "In that case, I won't bother you anymore. Little Shiji, please go ahead." Ao Wushuang smiled and said, "Eldest Shiji, I won't see you out." As she said this, she watched Mo Ashi walk to the door and suddenly thought of something. She asked, "By the way, eldest Shiji, how did you find this paper crane? Doesn't this paper crane belong to Chana? How could she have left it in the backyard?" Mo Ashi's body suddenly froze at the door. For a moment, her heart was in her throat, and her heart was pounding. Did this B*tch find me? Mo Ashi had always had ulterior motives. Originally, she had just come to test Ao Wushuang and Su Chan. If she saw the two of them together, she would find an opportunity to deal with them both. However, when she saw that Ao Wushuang was alone, she didn't want to make a move. She wanted to find another opportunity. But when she walked to the door, Ao Wushuang's words suddenly made her surprised and doubtful. Mo Ashi's figure at the door looked like a statue that had suddenly frozen, without a trace of vitality. She froze for a while, but soon came to her senses. She turned around and twisted her waist, and her whole person immediately became lively again. She walked toward Ao Wushuang and said with a smile, "You'll have to ask your precious disciple. Let's see how she does it." Ao Wushuang smiled and said, "Then I'll ask her when she comes back. But she has a bad temper and often loses things. It's normal for her to lose this paper crane." Mo Ashi didn't say anything after hearing this. She just stared at Ao Wushuang, as if she wanted to see through what she was thinking. Did she see through it or not? It seems that she didn't see through it. Mo Ashi's face didn't change, but she was quickly calculating in her heart. However, Ao Wushuang had made a great name for herself in the cultivation world over the years. The title of the top master of the Fox Zen school for more than 10 years was not for nothing. Mo Ashi couldn't help thinking, if she lied to me, then wouldn't all my years of planning be in vain? No, I'd rather believe it than not. To deal with this B*tch, I have to strike first. Thinking of this, Mo Ashi couldn't help but be shocked by Ao Wushuang's reputation. She secretly made up her mind and showed a smile on her face. "By the way, Shimmy, I suddenly remembered that sect leader Shishu mentioned Wang Yuanshan last time. Ao Wushuang only cared about two people in her life. One was Su Chan, and the other was Wang Yuanshan, the leader of the Linggong sect of the Jingyi school, who had been entangled with her for a while. As soon as she heard the name Wang Yuanshan, she trembled all over and couldn't help leaning forward slightly. Her Taoist heart was in a mess as she asked, "What? What's wrong with him?" Seeing that Ao Wushuang's chest was exposed, Mo Ashi immediately pointed one finger at Ao Wushuang's Huagai acupoint and the other at lightning speed at her Shenfeng acupoint. The threaded hairpin of soul traversal on her head also jumped out in an instant and stabbed at the Qihai acupoint in Ao Wushuang's lower abdomen like lightning. In an instant, Mo Ashi changed from a dignified female bodhisattva to a female rakshasa with disheveled hair. Her face was ferocious and murderous, /OM/4527-894-1954. Chapter 247. Go to watch net. Ao Wushuang hadn't expected that Mo Ashi would suddenly make a move. Although her cultivation and spiritual power were the best in the Fox Zen school, and her cultivation was above Mo Ashi's, it was not much higher. Go to watch net. 7 KOM. Color, text. Learn, net. Super_speed. More. New. If the two of them were to fight, Ao Wushuang would naturally have a greater chance of winning. But if one side was unprepared and the other suddenly attacked, she would naturally suffer a great loss. Ao Wushuang saw that Mo Ashi had suddenly changed her expression and launched a sneak attack. She subconsciously flicked her sleeves and blocked Mo Ashi's 2 fingers. However, she could defend against these 2 fingers, but she couldn't defend against the threaded hairpin of soul traversal. When the threaded hairpin of soul traversal attacked at close range, it had the effect of instant invisibility. It was extremely sinister. Ao Wushuang was caught off guard, so how could she block it? With a puff, Ao Wushuang felt a pain in her lower abdomen. She looked down and saw that the threaded hairpin of soul traversal was stuck in her lower abdomen. Seeing that Ao Wushuang's lower abdomen had been hit by the threaded hairpin of soul traversal, Mo Ashi couldn't help but sneer and say, as expected of Ao Wushuang. She didn't fall even after being hit by this powerful magical weapon. Amazing! Ao Wushuang was shocked and angry. She stared at Mo Ashi with her eyes wide open and said angrily, "Eldest Shiji, what are you doing?" Mo Ashi was stunned. "You still call me Eldest Shiji? Haven't you noticed?" Ao Wushuang's heart suddenly shook. Noticed what? Mo Ashi's expression was uncertain. She gritted her teeth and said with a sneer, "Nothing. Anyway, what's done can't be undone. Just surrender." As she spoke, she turned her wrist, and a small purple bell suddenly appeared in her hand. When Ao Wushuang saw the purple bell, her expression suddenly changed. She pointed at Mo Ashi and shouted, "This is impossible. You are." Mo Ashi did not allow her to speak. With a shake of her palm, the small bell flew up and became bigger and bigger in the air, covering Ao Wushuang. The Qihai acupoint in Ao Wushuang's lower abdomen had been pierced by the threaded hairpin of soul traversing, and her qi had become a mess. If it were any other cultivator with a slightly weaker qi, their souls would have been separated from their bodies. However, Ao Wushuang was still able to control the qi in her body to fight against the threaded hairpin of soul traversing, which showed how powerful she was. Watch net. 7 KOM. However, Ao Wushuang concentrated all her strength on the threaded hairpin of soul traversing, so she couldn't resist the small bell. Her body was instantly covered by the small bell, and then the small bell instantly shrank and flew back to Mo Ashi's hand. Ao Wushuang's figure disappeared on the spot, as if she had been imprisoned by the small purple bell in the celestial device. Holding the small bell in her hand, Mo Ashi smiled proudly and said, Ao Wushuang, you have such a day. Hey, don't worry, I won't kill you so soon. I want you to see with your own eyes that I kill all the people you are familiar with little by little, so that your Fox Zen school will fall apart. As she said this, she raised her head and laughed. Her voice was not loud, as if she was deliberately suppressing it, but the pride in her voice could not be concealed. After a while, her laughter gradually stopped. With a chuckle, she flipped her wrist and took the purple bell back. Then, she turned around and left. After she left, the room was quiet for a while. It was as if Ao Wushuang had never been there before. The inner and outer rooms were as quiet as a morning hall, and the air seemed to have frozen. After a long time, Mo Ashi's figure suddenly appeared in the outer room. She glanced around with murderous eyes, then flicked her sleeves and slammed open the door of the inner room. Her face was full of suspicion, and she couldn't help looking back and forth in the room. She sneered and said, "Come out, I can smell your breath." She flipped her wrist, and a mass of cyan airflow suddenly appeared in her hand. Mo Ashi sneered and said, "Don't let me use magic to force you out." After she said this, after a while, the room was still quiet, and there was no sound at all. Mo Ashi's face changed. She said harshly, "Then don't blame me for being rude." As she said this, she was about to pinch her fingers together. But at this moment, someone suddenly shouted from outside the door, "Eldest Shiji." The voice belonged to Gu Feng of the Fox Zen School. Mo Ashi quickly clenched her fingers and crushed the cyan airflow in her palm. She glanced at the room with hatred, stamped her feet, and quickly walked out. Not long after she went out, Su Chan's figure slowly appeared in the room. Her face was full of shock and fear. She trembled at the door and stuck her head out for a while. As soon as she poked her head out of the door, she saw Mo Ashi suddenly appear and point at her. She laughed and said, "Even though you are as cunning as a ghost, you still fell for it." As soon as she finished speaking, she pointed her finger at Su Chan's body. Su Chan's figure twisted and then disappeared in an instant. A talisman slowly floated down from the air. Go see net. 7 KOM. Mo Ashi suddenly became furious. She grabbed the talisman and quickly burned it to ashes. She roared in a low voice, "What kind of disciple is taught by the bitch? How dare you play tricks on me? You can't run away." As she said this, she suddenly turned her head and glared at Gu Feng outside the door. "Hurry up and catch her." Gu Feng frowned and asked, "Where can I catch her?" Mo Ashi said angrily, "You chase her in the east, and I'll chase her in the west. I don't believe that she can fly to the sky." After that, she instantly turned into a cyan light and flew out. Gu Feng stared at her back for a while with flickering eyes, then also turned into a cyan light and flew out. After the two of them had left for a long time, Su Chan's figure slowly appeared in the room. She was trembling all over, and her teeth were chattering. She thought in shock and fear, "What should I do? Master has been taken away by this evil person. What should I do?" She thought in panic for a while in the room before she slowly recovered from her fear. Su Chan took a deep breath and turned her body invisible again. She held her breath and hid in the inner room, not moving at all. During this period, Mo Ashi and Gu Feng came to check a few more times, but they didn't find anything unusual several times, so they gave up and didn't come again. When it was late at night, Su Chan slowly walked out of the Taoist temple under the cover of the night. She didn't dare to fly, for fear that if she flew, her breath would be exposed and attract Mo Ashi, the big devil. Along the way, Su Chan stumbled in the deep mountain. When she reached the foot of the mountain, she looked back and saw that the Taoist temple had been hidden in the deep mountain night. She could no longer see any shadow. Su Chan's heart relaxed a little and she took a breath. As soon as she relaxed, Su Chan couldn't help but feel sad. She sat down on a rock in the mountain and sobbed in a low voice, "Master, it's all my fault. If I hadn't shown up earlier because I was afraid, you wouldn't have been caught. Master, I was so scared when I saw Aunt Mo Ashi just now. I was so afraid that I would be sucked dry by her." She cried in a low voice for a while. For a moment, she felt that she was in the wilderness and didn't know where to go. She thought for a moment, crying and thinking, "Now that Master has been caught, I can't go back. Otherwise, I will definitely die. But where can I go now?" Thinking of this, Su Chan's heart suddenly moved. She jumped up and shouted in a low voice with excitement and ecstasy, "By the way, I'll go find Yundong. He must have a way to help me save Master." But before she could get excited for long, she suddenly thought, "But is Yundong a match for Mo Ashi? It seems that she has a few very powerful magical weapons in her hands. Moreover, I don't know if Yundong has passed the heavenly tribulation. If I rush to his side recklessly and delay his cultivation, what should I do if he can't pass the heavenly tribulation? What if Mo Ashi followed behind me and chased after me all the way?" Although Su Chan was usually careless, she was definitely not a fool. In the past, when she was with Li Yundong, she seemed to be stupid and often made mistakes, but that was because she had absolute trust in Li Yundong and didn't like to use her brain. But when she was alone and had no one to rely on, her wit and intelligence showed itself. Su Chan thought for a moment and gradually made up her mind. Finally, she looked back at the location of the Fox Zen school and then in the direction of Tiannan City. Then, she turned around and disappeared into the night. Just as Su Chan was escaping, two blue lights flashed in the air. Mo Ashi and Gu Feng appeared in Mo Ashi's room at the same time. Mo Ashi said with a livid face, "Didn't you find the whereabouts of that little B***tch? Gu Feng shook his head. No. Mo Ashi gritted her teeth and said, "Why are you so useless?" Gu Feng glanced at her and sneered. "Don't try to command me. I'm from the Wanxiang sect, and I'm not bound by your control. Besides, you didn't catch her either, did you? What right do you have to criticize me?" Mo Ashi was furious. Her dignified and beautiful face suddenly became ferocious. She glared at Gu Feng fiercely and said, "What did you say?" Gu Feng was frightened by her appearance and took a step back. He said warily, "What do you want to do? Do you want to fight here? Well, come on, let the leader of the Fox Zen school see how his disciples fight among themselves." Mo Ashi's expression became serious. She took a deep breath, suppressed the anger in her heart, and said coldly, "I won't settle accounts with you for today's matter, but you should inform the 6 great sects as soon as possible. Tell them that the siege of the Fox Zen school will be brought forward." Gu Feng couldn't help but shout in a low voice, "Do you think you are the leader of the cultivation world? If you say it will be delayed, then it will be delayed. If you say it will be brought forward, then it will be brought forward. Don't you think too highly of yourself?" Mo Ashi flew into a rage. She suddenly stretched out her hand and grabbed Gu Feng in the air. She said fiercely, "Without me, the 6 great sects wouldn't even be able to find the Fox Zen school. How can we besiege it? Now Ao Wushuang has been sealed by me, and I don't know where her disciple is. If we don't besiege the Fox Zen school immediately, it won't take long for Lu Yi, that old fox, to realize it. Once he realizes it, he will find that the strength of the Fox Zen school has been greatly damaged, and a strong enemy has come to attack us. Humph, you can forget about finding the whereabouts of the Fox Zen school for the rest of your lives." Gu Feng was choked by her. He struggled and said reluctantly, You put me down. Even if you strangle me to death, you won't get any benefits. Ao Wushuang has disappeared. If I also disappear, how will you explain it to Lu Yi?" Mo Ashi flung her arm and threw Gu Feng away. She said coldly, "If it weren't for the fact that you are still useful, I would have killed you long ago. How dare a small Wanxiang sect fight with me? Humph, even your leader has to be polite to me when he sees me. Who do you think you are? How dare you take advantage of me?" As she said this, Mo Ashi pointed at Gu Feng and said murderously, "Let me tell you, I have been planning to destroy the Fox Zen school for 9 years. If you dare to ruin my plan, I promise you that you will suffer a fate worse than death." When Gu Feng heard this, he suddenly shivered. He knew that Mo Ashi did have such magical power. As a cultivator, the most terrible thing was not death, because once they cultivated to the point where their Yin spirit could leave their body, they could transcend life and death. Even if their physical bodies were destroyed, they could be reincarnated in another body. However, if they were caught by some great cultivators, their physical bodies would be imprisoned, their souls would be sealed, and they would be tortured all the time. That would be the most terrifying thing for cultivators. The corner of Gu Feng's eyes twitched. He forced a smile and said, I know. Destroying the Fox Zen school is the common goal of our 6 sections. I'll go and inform them now." Mo Ashi flicked her sleeves and shouted in a low voice, "Go. In 2 weeks at the latest, the 6 sects will take action. At that time, I will be the spy and destroy the devil sect in one fell swoop, /om/4527-894-1954. I was in a difficult position, wasn't I? As he watched Zi Yuan skillfully driving the car, he suddenly thought of something and asked, when did you learn to drive? Do you have a driver's license? Zi Yuan glanced at him faintly. I learned it in the past few days. Hongling isn't here, so no one will drive for me. I'll go to the internet. 7 K.O.M. Li Yundong smiled and said, I can drive for you. Zi Yuan couldn't help rolling her eyes at him. You. Forget it, I don't dare to trouble you. Li Yundong thought of the two of them driving in Tibet and couldn't help laughing dryly. As Zi Yuan drove, she asked casually, did you cure Zhou Qin? Li Yundong was stunned, but then he nodded and sighed slightly. Yes, she really suffered a lot. Zi Yuan smiled and looked at Li Yundong meaningfully. Don't you like her at all? Li Yundong thought for a moment, then shook his head. If I hadn't known Su Chan, I would definitely have liked her. But. As he said this, he shrugged his shoulders and spread out his hands. But I don't feel like there's a connection between me and Su Chan. What should I do? This kind of thing can't be forced. Zi Yuan was stunned. She turned her head and looked at Li Yundong in confusion. What do you mean by a connection? Li Yundong smiled and said, when you have someone you love in the future, you will know. I can't explain it to you. Zi Yuan was silent when she heard this. She drove back to Hongsheng New area with a complicated expression. When they returned to Li Yundong's home, Zi Yuan followed him in. She was silent for a long time. When Li Yundong sat down cross-legged and began to meditate, she suddenly said, do you feel the omen of heaven's retribution? Li Yundong hadn't expected Zi Yuan to suddenly ask such a question. He asked in confusion, no, can you feel it? Zi Yuan nodded slowly. She looked up at the vast starry sky outside the balcony and said in a deep voice, I can feel the energy gathering in the sky growing bit by bit. You've been busy with the affairs of the secular world these days, so you can't calm down, so you naturally can't feel it. Go to the internet. 7 K.O.M. Now calm down and feel the power in the air around you. You will feel the difference. Li Yundong had rarely seen Zi Yuan show such a solemn and serious expression. He couldn't help but look serious. He closed his eyes and began to qi. With this qi, he quickly entered the small Zhoutian realm, and then entered the great Zhoutian realm. It didn't take long for him to feel that his lost Jinqi was quickly being replenished. Then, this vigorous Jinqi continued to spread and climb around like tentacles. When his Jinqi spread out of the balcony like a rising tide, he suddenly felt a tingling sensation coming to his face. In an instant, Li Yundong felt that in his spirit space, the sky was rolling with dark clouds. It really had the terrifying effect of dark clouds pressing down on the city. These rolling dark clouds condensed into a vague face. There was no nose, ears, or mouth, only a pair of cold eyes, which looked extremely dignified. When this pair of eyes stared at Li Yundong, he felt all the hair on his body stand on end. This feeling was extremely terrifying, just like the last time he had been stared at by heavenly thunder in the air. Li Yundong was so scared that he immediately woke up from his meditation. His face was slightly pale, and a layer of cold sweat broke out on his back. He looked frightened and a little lost in thought. Zi Yuan saw it clearly from the side. She asked softly, how is it? Can you feel a pair of eyes staring at you in your spirit space? Li Yundong turned his head and looked at Zi Yuan in surprise. How do you know? Zi Yuan smiled slightly. Once the cultivators in the world pass the Zhuji phase and begin to practice Shintong, they will be noticed by heaven. Especially before the divine tribulation comes, a pair of eyes will appear in the spirit space. These eyes are the heavenly eyes, which are always monitoring the cultivators' Shintong. Once they grow to a certain extent, the divine tribulation will automatically come to them. Li Yundong was stunned. After a while, he said with a wry smile, so I can't cultivate now, and I can't not cultivate either. The faster I cultivate, the faster the divine tribulation will come. Zi Yuan sighed softly. Yes, that's indeed the case. If you don't cultivate, the divine tribulation will still come. When it comes, the weaker your spiritual power is, the more impossible it will be for you to survive it. But the faster you cultivate, the faster the divine tribulation will come. Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, "Damn it, aren't you kidding me?" Zi Yuan stared at Li Yundong and asked solemnly, "Are you sure you want to continue cultivating?" Li Yundong laughed and said, "Of course, how can I retreat because of fear? It's just that I don't know how to cultivate next." Zi Yuan looked at Li Yundong's face for a long time before she slowly showed a look of approval. She nodded slightly and said, "Well, I'll teach you the next cultivation." Li Yundong was overjoyed. "That's great." Zi Yuan said, "Shentong is the fifth of the 9 heavens. I believe you should already know this." Li Yundong listened carefully, like a student eager for knowledge. He nodded. Zi Yuan then said, "The Shentong is divided into 3 realms, the Little Shentong, the Medium Shentong, and the Great Shentong." Li Yundong asked curiously, "What's the difference between the 3? Is it just the size of the Shentong's spiritual power? What's the standard?" Zi Yuan smiled approvingly and said, "Not bad, you know why. The difference between the 3 is easy to distinguish. The Little Shentong focuses on strengthening one's self-control. For example, Lin Youfa of the Immortal Fist sect cultivates a Little Shentong." Li Yunyang immediately thought of the few times he had fought with Lin Youfa. When Lin Youfa had invited Marshal Tianping to possess him, he had seen his terrifying appearance. He couldn't help but ask with a face full of doubt, "When I saw him invite God to possess him, it was no different from a god descending to the world. Is this also a minor Shentong?" Zi Yuan chuckled and said, "Although the 3 great Shentong have different names, there is actually no difference between the 3 realms." Li Yundong asked in confusion, "Then why is it said that the Little Shentong is the Great Shentong?" Zi Yuan explained, "Since Zhongling founded our Taoist sect in the Han dynasty, there have been countless cultivators for thousands of years. Their cultivation methods and paths are also different. Some people focus on cultivating their self-control in order to reach the way of heaven. Some people focus on cultivating talismans and magic weapons in order to reach the way of heaven. Some people focus on cultivating the chi of heaven and earth in order to become immortals. These 3 kinds of people, because of their different cultivation methods and different levels of difficulty, are divided into Little Shentong, Medium Shentong, and Great Shentong." As Zi Yuan spoke, she also sat cross-legged in front of Li Yundong and spoke with confidence. Li Yundong still asked with a puzzled face, "But last time I heard from Ao Wushuang that he knows more than a dozen Great Shentong and dozens of Little Shentong. What do you mean?" Zi Yuan smiled and said, "This Shentong is not that kind of Shentong. The Shentong that Ao Wushuang is talking about refers to magic, and the Shentong I'm talking about is the path and method of cultivation." Li Yundong suddenly understood. "Oh, I see. I understand. I remember you told me last time that the cultivation of Shentong is to constantly strengthen one's Naiden." Zi Yuan said, "That's right, but this kind of cultivation is aimless. It's just to consolidate the foundation and cultivate the primordial spirit. The reason why I didn't teach you at that time was because you had just reached the Zhuji phase and your Naiden was not strong enough to further cultivate Shentong." Li Yundong asked, "What kind of Shentong are you cultivating?" Zi Yuan said, "I started with Little Shentong and supplemented it with Medium Shentong. When I was 17 years old, I had already cultivated to the realm of Great Shentong." Li Yundong asked curiously, "Is your Jingyi school the cultivation method of Little Shentong?" Zi Yuan nodded and said, "Now, 9 out of 10 cultivators in the world start with Little Shentong, because the cultivation methods of Little Shentong are the most extensive and the safest. They are the most suitable for cultivators to cultivate step by step. Li Yunyang said with a wry smile, I'm a little confused by the little Shentong, medium Shentong, and great Shentong. Isn't the little Shentong, medium Shentong, and great Shentong a bit like the difference between internal and external punching skills? Chapter 249. Go to watch net. Zi Yuan had rarely lost her composure before. When she heard Li Yundong's words, she couldn't help but ridicule him. You haven't even learned how to walk, and you want to learn how to run. Let me tell you, the great Shentong has long been lost. Now almost all cultivators start with the small and medium Shentong, and finally can cultivate the effect of the great Shentong. Go to watch net. Updated at a very fast speed. Li Yundong was stunned. Lost? The kung fu of cultivating the qi of heaven and earth has been lost. Isn't that a pity? Zi Yuan also sighed and said, yes, although I eventually reached the realm of the great Shentong through the cultivation of the small Shentong and medium Shentong, it was not achieved through the cultivation of the great Shentong after all. I don't have the vast aura that the great Shentong is born with. I can't understand the feeling of taking the essence of heaven and earth for my own use. What a pity. Li Yundong smiled and said, your cultivation is very strange. It seems that you want to experience all kinds of feelings in the world. Zi Yuan glanced at Li Yundong and said meaningfully, of course, I have always been a cultivator. Only by experiencing all kinds of things in the world can I have a strong mind and have a better chance of winning when facing the thunder retribution. As she said this, she sighed softly in her heart. My master said that if I want to pass the divine retribution, I must pass you. Otherwise, I will have no hope of cultivating immortality in this life. But, how can I get past you? Zi Yuan thought faintly. Her heart was in a mess. Now, Zi Yuan had already regarded the psalms left by her master as the goal of her cultivation. She had entered the world to solve this puzzle, and then she could cultivate to become an immortal. While she was struggling here, Li Yundong said, I heard so much from you just now, and I roughly understand some things. Among the three kinds of Shentong, the great Shentong has been lost, so let's not worry about it for the time being. The cultivation of the small Shentong is the slowest, but there are many methods and enough momentum. As long as you keep practicing, you will most likely be able to reach the realm of the great Shentong. The medium Shentong is the fastest, but there are not many methods, and it relies too much on external things. Although it is successful, it lacks momentum. Is that so? Zi Yuan nodded and said, yes, there are two paths in front of you now. One is to start with the minor supernatural power and cultivate step by step in a down-to-earth manner. The other is to start with the medium supernatural power. I'll use an external artifact to help you steal the secrets of heaven and take a shortcut to quickly increase your magic power. However, this is very, very dangerous. If you're not careful, you'll be crushed into pieces and your body and soul will be destroyed. Li Yundong's expression suddenly became solemn and he asked, how do I cultivate the little Shentong? How do you cultivate the medium divine art? Zi Yuan said, the method of the little magical power is to cultivate it through the method of dual cultivation of life and death. When Li Yundong heard the words, life and death dual cultivation, he couldn't help thinking about it, and his expression became strange. Life and death dual cultivation. You and me. Zi Yuan didn't react for a moment and said curiously, of course it's you. Li Yundong had a strange look on his face. Myself? How am I supposed to dual cultivate by myself? Could it be with my hands? At this time, Zi Yuan reacted. Her face suddenly turned red. She glared at Li Yundong shyly and angrily and said, what nonsense are you talking about? The life and death dual cultivation I'm talking about means Buddhism and Taoism. How can you think of that? Only then did Li Yundong realize that he had misunderstood. He said with an embarrassed smile, "Why does life and death dual cultivation mean Buddhism and Taoism?" Zi Yuan's cheeks were red. She was so embarrassed by Li Yundong's words that her earlobes were so red that they seemed to be dripping blood. She glared at Li Yundong angrily again, bit her lip, and said, "In the Northern Song dynasty, Zhenren Zi Yang, Zhang Buduan, once said." Li Yundong saw that Zi Yuan's cheeks were rosy, and the corners of her eyes were rolling. Her usually beautiful face suddenly became shy, and her beauty immediately doubled. He couldn't help but be a little stunned. Looking at Zi Yuan's face, he was a little infatuated for a moment, until Zi Yuan couldn't help but shout angrily, "What are you looking at? I'm talking to you." Only then did Li Yundong wake up as if from a dream. He looked up to the sky and laughed dryly. "No, nothing. Go on. What did Zhang Buduan say?" Zi Yuan suppressed the shyness in her heart. She bit her lip and glared at Li Yundong angrily for a long time. When her anger subsided a little, she said, "Zhenren Zi Yang said, Taoism is based on fate, so it talks about fate and nature in detail. Buddhism is based on nature, so it talks about fate and nature in detail. Go to see the net. 7 KOM. Color. Text. Learn, net. Super_speed. More. New. Li Yundong coughed dryly and asked, "What does that mean?" Zi Yuan said, "It means that Taoism pays more attention to the cultivation of one's own body and ignores the cultivation of one's nature and spirit, while Buddhism likes philosophical debate and spiritual cultivation, but ignores the cultivation of the body." Li Yundong asked in confusion, "Isn't this still the difference between internal and external punching techniques? You should know that simply cultivating the internal or the external is biased after all. One should cultivate both at the same time." The shyness in Zi Yuan's heart gradually disappeared. When she heard Li Yundong's words, she couldn't help but praise, "You're right. You are indeed the successor of Jin Dan. I can't believe that you are a cultivator who has been cultivating for less than half a year. Zhang Buduan believes that only the Niden that combines Taoism and Zen and cultivates both life and death is the best. Go to the internet." He asked curiously, in the Northern Song dynasty, Zhang Buduan already knew that he wanted to cultivate both Buddhism and Taoism. Then why is the gap between Buddhism and Taoism still so deep after that? Even you think that Buddhism and Taoism can't be cultivated at the same time? Zi Yuan sighed and said, "Knowing and doing are two different things. Zhang Buduan himself advocates the cultivation of both Buddhism and Taoism, but in fact, he emphasizes more on the dual cultivation of mind and body, which is different from the real cultivation of both Buddhism and Taoism. Our Taoism has been around for nearly 2,000 years, but among so many cultivators, only people like Chao Huanyang, Wu Shouyang, and Lu Huayang have cultivated the combination of immortals and Buddhists, truly integrating Buddhism and Taoism into one. It can be seen how difficult this matter is. I just thought that it was too difficult. There are too few people who cultivate to become immortals in this way. So many sects regard the cultivation of both Buddhism and Taoism as a false way, comparable to wild fox Zen." Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, "If it's so difficult, then why do you say that it's easier than the method of Taoism? Are you kidding me? In that case, how perverted would the divine ability be?" Zi Yuan said, "Cultivation is the most difficult thing in the world. If it were so easy, the world would have been full of immortals." Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, "Well, since the cultivation of both Buddhism and Taoism is so difficult, how do you know that I can complete it in such a short period of time?" Zi Yuan stared at Li Yundong with bright eyes and said, "You have a strange and rare opportunity. Although you entered the Tao with Jin Dan and cultivated the Zhuji phase using the Taoist method, after you reached the Zhuji phase, you learned the Buddhist mantra Mahamudra without a teacher. In this way, your Naiden can be said to have the characteristics of the fusion of Buddhism and Taoism. You can use both Taoist magic and Buddhist magic. Speaking of this, Zi Yuan suddenly showed a puzzled look. She looked Li Yundong up and down and said, I have observed all the cultivators in the cultivation world, but I have never seen anyone with such talent as you, nor have I seen anyone with such a coincidence. Logically speaking, you can't use Buddhist magic at all when you use the Taoist method to cultivate Naiden, but you can use it without any difficulty, which makes me puzzled. Are you really an ordinary person? Li Yundong laughed and said, maybe I am a very extraordinary ordinary person. In fact, when I was learning, I didn't think about anything. Just like drawing on a blank piece of paper, I could naturally draw at will. But cultivators like you have received orthodox cultivation training since you were born and have been instilled with dogmatic cultivation theories. Just like a piece of paper full of drawings, it is naturally difficult for you to draw anything on it. No, the barrier between Buddhism and Taoism is very strict. If it were so simple, Buddhism and Taoism would have merged for thousands of years. Zi Yuan shook her head subconsciously, but after a while she nodded again. She frowned and said to herself, but, apart from this explanation, it seems that there is no other explanation. Li Yundong said indifferently, why do you care so much? How do you think I should practice the dual cultivation of life and death? Zi Yuan came to her senses and said, it's very simple. Just read more Buddhist magic books. Since your Naiden is a fusion of Buddhism and Taoism, you will naturally understand it if you read more books. Although this method is a little stupid, there is no better way at present. Li Yundong said with a wry smile, then when will it take? Divine tribulation won't give me so much time. What's the way? How can I steal the secret of heaven and take a shortcut? Zi Yuan said, it's very simple. I'll use a magical item to create a spirit space for you and then simulate the scene of the arrival of divine tribulation. I'll let you taste the taste of divine tribulation first and realize the rapid growth of your spiritual energy in the great horror of life and death. Li Yundong asked in confusion, why can my spiritual energy grow rapidly in the great horror of life and death? Zi Yuan said, the human body has potential. Ordinary people can burst out with power that they usually don't have at a critical moment of life and death. A thin old woman can also lift a car. The same is true for cultivators. In the great horror of life and death, they can constantly stimulate their potential for cultivation. Of course, you can understand this behavior as overdrawing, but this is the only way to increase your cultivation in a short period of time. Li Yundong pondered for a while, then raised his head and said resolutely, then I want to try this method. When I was visualizing just now, I felt that the divine tribulation seemed to be a matter of a few days. Although the method of dual cultivation of life and death is good, for me, distant water can't put out a nearby fire, so I have to take a risk. Zi Yuan nodded. She didn't seem to move, but suddenly a stream of light surged in her hand, and a purple and gold-rimmed compass suddenly appeared. Li Yundong looked at it and saw that the compass was about the size of a palm. It looked like it was made of purple jade, and there were some strange patterns on it. They looked like scales, but also like runes. Li Yundong asked curiously, is this your powerful magical weapon? What's its use? Zi Yuan said with a profound look in her eyes, this is a powerful magical weapon passed down to me by my master. It's one of the 3 most powerful magical weapons of the Zhenyi school's Linggong sect. It's called the Purple Gold Jade Plate. It has endless magical uses. One of them is that it allows the caster to create a spirit space out of thin air and pull the people around him into this spirit space. Li Yundong asked in confusion, what's the use of pulling people in? Zi Yuan smiled and said, you'll know its magical use in a while. After that, she spread out her palm and spread the purple gold jade plate in the air. After a while, the jade plate began to spin rapidly on its own, emitting a golden light. At first, the golden light was relatively dim, but as the jade plate spun faster and faster, the golden light became more and more dazzling. Gradually, Li Yundong felt that the golden light was so dazzling that he was blind. He couldn't help but close his eyes. But even if he closed his eyes, he still felt that the golden light in front of him was stimulating his eyeballs through his eyelids. It wasn't until more than a minute later that it slowly faded away. When Li Yundong opened his eyes again, he found himself standing in the air between heaven and earth. Under his feet were mountains and rivers, rising and falling one after another, stretching endlessly. It was extremely magnificent. "Where is this?" Li Yundong asked in surprise. "This is the spirit space of the purple gold jade plate." Zi Yuan's voice suddenly rang in Li Yundong's ear. Li Yundong turned his head and looked around, but he didn't see Zi Yuan. He couldn't help but shout, "So magical! Are these all fake? Is it the same as what I imagined?" Zi Yuan said, "You can say that, but the heavenly thunder in a while is real." Li Yundong was stunned. "What do you mean?" There was a hint of joy in Zi Yuan's voice, as if she had avenged the humiliation she had suffered just now. "Because if you are struck to death by heavenly thunder here, your physical body outside will also die." Li Yundong was taken aback. "F***ck, are you serious?" As he spoke, the wind and clouds surged above Li Yundong's head, and the dark clouds rolled. With a crack, a bolt of lightning struck him heavily. /OM/4527-894-1954 Chapter 250. Go to watch net. This bolt of heavenly thunder came fast and fierce. Li Yundong didn't have time to react at all and was hit heavily by it. Go to watch net. 7 KOM. At this moment, Li Yundong's figure in the spirit space was instantly swallowed by the heavenly thunder and disappeared in the blink of an eye. In the spirit space of the purple gold jade plate, he had been killed in an instant. Outside the spirit space, Li Yundong suddenly opened his eyes and looked at himself in horror. He kept touching his body, as if he wanted to see if there were any parts missing. Zi Yuan couldn't help pursing her lips and smiling. "What are you doing?" Li Yundong asked in shock. "I'm still alive." Zi Yuan turned her face away and chuckled. Then she turned back and tried hard to hold back her laughter. "You've already died once." Li Yundong opened his mouth wide. "Didn't you just say that if I was killed by the heavenly thunder inside, my body outside would also die?" Zi Yuan smiled and said, "I lied to you, can't I?" Li Yundong smiled bitterly. "You almost scared me to death just now. The moment I was struck by the thunder, I was so shocked that I thought I was going to die." Zi Yuan stopped smiling and looked at Li Yundong seriously. "How does it feel to be struck by heavenly thunder? Have you experienced the great horror of life and death?" Li Yundong's expression was solemn. He remembered the moment when he had been struck by the thunder just now and couldn't help but shiver. "I've experienced it. It's really terrifying. At that moment, I seemed to be able to see the little things that I had experienced with Su Chan in the past. I've always heard that people will recall their happiest moments before they die, so I really thought I was going to die at that time. At that moment, I had a feeling that everything around me was empty, as if I didn't exist, and there was only that terrible heavenly thunder in the world." Li Yundong said, "Heavenly thunder is the power of heaven, and the power of heaven is unpredictable." "This is true." Zi Yuan asked, "Do you want to try this feeling again?" Li Yundong took a deep breath. He hesitated for a moment, but still said resolutely, "Yes." Zi Yuan nodded. "Just now, I told you that if you were struck to death by heavenly thunder, your physical body outside would also die. That was because I wanted you to experience the great horror of life and death. You can only experience it the first time. It will be very difficult for you to experience it again in the future. Li Yundong laughed and said, "You sly bastard. It's obvious that you're using your position to avenge a personal grudge. Don't quibble, the eyes of the people are clear." Zi Yuan pursed her lips and said with a smile, "Don't be glib. Do you want to go in again? Think about it. The more times you go in, the more powerful the heavenly thunder will be. Once the power of the heavenly thunder reaches a certain degree, the more severe the wounds you will receive in this dimension will be. Although it can enhance your magic power and true essence, it will also affect your will and mind, causing you to subconsciously fear the heavenly thunder more and more. Have you thought it through?" Li Yundong waved his hand indifferently and said with a smile, "What's there to think about? Anyway, it doesn't matter whether I stick my head out or not. Hurry up, let me go in again to play." Zi Yuan looked at Li Yundong with admiration. When cultivators in the cultivation world saw heavenly thunder, it was as if they had seen a life-demanding ghost. They were all scared to death, but the person in front of her didn't seem to be afraid at all. Instead, he kept urging her. "Go to the net." Zi Yuan gently wiped the purple gold jade plate in front of her, and it began to spin rapidly again. There was a burst of golden light, and Li Yundong couldn't help but close his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, he was no longer in midair. Instead, he was standing on a flat grassland with lofty mountains and precipitous ridges behind him. Li Yundong looked around curiously, only to find that Zi Yuan had also come in. She was wearing a large dark purple Taoist robe, and her clothes were fluttering in the wind, making her look like a fairy. Li Yundong smiled and said, "Jinren, where do you come from and where are you going?" Zi Yuan and Li Yundong had been together for a long time, so she was more or less human. She cooperatively formed a palm with one hand and saluted. "Amitba, I came from Mount Longhu and am going to the 9th heaven. May I know where you are from and where are you going?" Li Yundong imitated Zi Yuan's style and said seriously, "Amitba, I came from the Tang dynasty of the East, and I specially went to the Western heaven to worship Buddha and ask for his hand in marriage." Zi Yuan couldn't help laughing out loud. "If Lu Huayang and Wu Shouyang knew that you were such a combination of immortals and Buddhas, I'm afraid they would be so angry that they would jump around." Li Yundong also chuckled and said, "I'm good at cultivating. Who cares about them?" Zi Yuan's laughter gradually stopped. She looked up at the sky and saw that the originally blue and cloudless sky was quickly gathering dark clouds. Lightning was rolling in the clouds, which was extremely frightening. She said, "The heavenly thunder will come soon. You must remember to hide as much as you can. This is because when the heavenly lightning strikes down, a powerful heavenly might will leak out from the heavenly lightning. What you need to do is to absorb as much of this heavenly might as you dodge." Li Yundong asked in confusion, "Isn't this spirit space virtual? How come the heavens might divine power that was absorbed here can be used in the vast thousand worlds?" Zi Yuan said, "Why did you appear in this spirit space?" "It's all because the violet gold jade disc captured a trace of your quintessential essence aura and created a person like you based on that trace of quintessential essence. Similarly, the heaven and earth heavenly lightning is also a scene created by the violet gold jade disc capturing the heaven and earth spiritual chi. Go to the net. 7 KOM. You should know that the purple gold jade plate has existed for thousands of years. It has been absorbing the chi of heaven and earth for thousands of years, and the energy it has stored is extremely powerful. Although the simulated heavenly thunder is not as good as the real heavenly thunder, it is not far from it." Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He slapped his thigh and said loudly, "I understand. Isn't this the same as playing in online games? F***ck, this magical item is too powerful. It can allow people to play infinitely. Doesn't that mean that their strength can become infinitely stronger?" Zi Yuan couldn't help but roll her eyes at Li Yundong and said angrily, "You wish. Even I am reluctant to use the energy stored in the purple gold jade plate. Moreover, this is a shortcut. If I use it too much, I will be punished by heaven. Besides, this kind of power that is obtained through trickery is ultimately not as useful as the power that is obtained through one's own hard work and cultivation bit by bit. Li Yundong chuckled and said, "You are reluctant to use it, but you gave it to me. How can I repay you?" Zi Yuan said angrily, "If you don't make fun of me, it will be enough to repay me." Li Yundong's face was serious. "Don't worry, I will never make fun of you again. If I make fun of you again, I will be struck by lightning." After that, he immediately smiled and said, "Miss Hua, how old are you this year?" As soon as his voice fell, a bolt of heavenly thunder suddenly fell from the sky. In the blink of an eye, Li Yundong, who was in the spirit space, was smashed to pieces. Li Yundong suddenly woke up. Seeing Zi Yuan covering her mouth and laughing, he couldn't help but say angrily, "F***ck, it's fine if the heavenly thunder wants to strike me, but at least let me know in advance." Zi Yuan said with a smile, "This is divine retribution. Who told you to be so glib? If you do this again, I won't let you in." Li Yundong smiled awkwardly and said, "Fairy sister, I know I was wrong. Can't I apologize now?" Zi Yuan glanced at Li Yundong and pursed her lips into a smile. "Your attitude is not bad. Forget it, I forgive you." After that, she once again used her magical power to bring Li Yundong into the spirit space. This time, Li Yundong was mentally prepared. The moment the heavenly thunder struck down, he keenly felt a powerful force falling from the sky, which made his hair stand on end. Li Yundong's figure suddenly moved, and in an instant, he moved to a different position. With a bang, he saw that the heavenly thunder had struck a deep pit, and smoke was rising faintly. Li Yundong leaned over to take a look and saw that the pit was bottomless, which was creepy. He laughed dryly and said, "Such a terrifying heavenly thunder, didn't I still avoid it?" But before he could finish speaking, another bolt of lightning came down from the sky and struck him squarely on his body. In the blink of an eye, Li Yundong was sent back to the spirit space. He said angrily, "How can there be more after avoiding it?" Zi Yuan couldn't help laughing and said, "Do you think there is only one bolt of lightning in the heavenly tribulation? You take it too lightly. Why are we cultivators afraid of heavenly tribulation? Because once the heavenly tribulation is launched, there will be 81 bolts of heavenly thunder, each more powerful and fierce than the last. It will continue until the target is killed, otherwise, the heavenly tribulation will not stop." Li Yundong was shocked. 81 times. I have to dodge 81 times in a row. This is too exaggerated, isn't it? Zi Yuan said, "Of course, otherwise why would we cultivators change our expressions when we talk about heavenly tribulation?" Li Yundong took a deep breath, and his expression changed. After a while, he said in a low voice, "I see. Let me in again." When Li Yundong entered the spirit space of the purple gold luo jade plate again, he was mentally prepared. After dodging the first bolt of heavenly thunder, he dodged the second. But when the third bolt of heavenly thunder came, its speed and power were suddenly twice as fierce as the previous two. Li Yundong was caught off guard and was struck out of the spirit space in the blink of an eye. As soon as Li Yundong opened his eyes, he shouted unwillingly, again, "I don't believe it." Zi Yuan smiled slightly and once again used her shentong to let Li Yundong enter the spirit space. This time, Li Yundong held his breath and concentrated on feeling the power of the heavenly thunder. After dodging 3 bolts of heavenly thunder in a row, he suddenly felt that when he was dodging, a trace of the power emitted by the heavenly thunder had unconsciously integrated into his body. At first, Li Yundong didn't understand why he could absorb this power, but after thinking about it, he understood. He thought, this is the same as basking in the sun. Turtles often climb ashore to bask in the sun in the morning. Because the tortoise's back was young, and the yang qi was the strongest in the morning, basking in the sun at this time was to absorb the yang qi between heaven and earth. The tortoise had absorbed the yang qi for a long time, so the tortoise's back could be used as medicine, which was a great tonic. Modern cultivators combined the theory of cultivation with modern science. They believed that life was a body of energy, and according to Newton's law of universal gravitation, strong energy would attract weak energy to itself. Although the energy of the sun was far greater than that of the tortoise, when the sun shone on the distant ground, this energy had been extremely dispersed and weakened. The energy of the tortoise exceeded the energy of the sun, so it could absorb this weak energy. The same was true of heavenly thunder. Of course, the power of a heavenly thunder was amazing, but after the strike, some of its energy was inevitably scattered between heaven and earth. Compared with Li Yundong, this energy was much weaker. Naturally, it would be automatically attracted by Li Yundong's energy body and turn into his own. Understanding this, Li Yundong couldn't help but be excited. But as soon as he was excited, the fourth bolt of heavenly thunder in the sky struck him and sent him back to the spirit space. After Li Yundong opened his eyes, he tasted the sweetness of absorbing the power of heaven and earth. He urged Zi Yuan excitedly, "Come on, come on." Seeing that Li Yundong was eager to try and was full of energy, Zi Yuan reminded him, "Be careful not to be too excited. You have to be calm. This is the way of cultivation." After that, she sent Li Yundong into the spirit space again. Li Yundong went back and forth like this, shuttling between the spirit space and the spirit space 13 times in a row. By the 14th time, he could already dodge 32 heavenly thunder. When he came out for the 14th time, although Li Yundong felt that his Jinqi was much stronger than before, he felt very tired. Li Yundong waved his hand to Zi Yuan and said, "Let me take a break and catch my breath." As he said this, he tilted his head and suddenly laughed. "Why do I feel like I'm playing a game like, if you're a man, go down to the 100th floor?" Zi Yuan blinked her eyes in confusion and asked, "What did you say?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Nothing, it's just a small game." He closed his eyes and ran his qi for a while. After turning the power he had absorbed into his own, he opened his eyes. When he opened his eyes, he found that it was already dawn. Zi Yuan was in the living room, setting the bowls and chopsticks. Zi Yuan greeted him and said, "You're awake. Come over and have dinner." Li Yundong didn't stand on ceremony. After sitting down and having a hearty meal, he waved his hand and urged Zi Yuan, again, "I must pass 60 times today. Hey, it's quite fun. If you're a man, you'll dodge 81 times. After saying that, he burst out laughing. He was depressed. He deleted the post, but all the posts on the first page had disappeared. All the pinned posts had disappeared. He was so depressed that he was going crazy. He had an inch of black beard and a haughty expression. The one on the right was a woman in a Taoist robe. She had a graceful figure and a beautiful appearance. She carried a long sword on her back and held a horsetail whisk in her hand. Her eyes constantly looked around. The man in the middle was young and handsome. His eyebrows slanted to his temples. He was empty-handed, but a pair of jade earrings hung from his ears, and his fingers were covered with all kinds of jade rings. As soon as the man saw Wan Hongling coming out, his eyes lit up. He smiled and took the initiative to step forward, saying, "Amateus, are you Zhenren Zi Yuan of the Linggong sect?" Wan Hongling glanced at them and quickly realized that their cultivation levels were not low. None of them were below hers, especially the young man in the middle. His cultivation was far higher than hers, and he could even be compared to Zi Yuan. Watch net. Wan Hongling glared at the woman who had spoken rudely and said with a cold face, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" Before the young man could speak, the Taoist nun next to him hurriedly said, "Are you blind? This is the youngest son of the leader of our Zhenyi school. He is also the last disciple. People call him Zhenren Yuyang Zhang Tianhe. Why, haven't you heard of him? Wan Hongling was furious. If it had been any other time, she might have scolded the woman with her hands on her hips and even fought with her. However, the person in front of her had a powerful background. He was the youngest son of the leader of the Zhenyi school and the last disciple. He was the future leader of the Zhenyi school. He could even represent the entire Zhenyi school. Although the Linggong sect belonged to the Zhenyi school, it had developed for thousands of years and had formed a branch of the sect. It was not directly under the control of the Zhenyi school, but no matter what, it was still a sect under the Zhenyi school. They more or less looked up to it. Seeing the son of the leader of the other party, Wan Hongling unconsciously put on airs. This was because she knew that the Linggong sect had declined so far. She couldn't let the other party underestimate the Linggong sect. Wan Hongling's face was solemn. She saluted back and said, "My Shiji is not here. What can I do for you?" Ever since Zhang Tianhe started cultivating, he had heard people constantly talk about Zi Yuan's beauty and talent. He had been talking about her so much that his ears had become calloused. Today, he had been ordered to go down the mountain by his master. When he passed by the Linggong sect, he thought of Zi Yuan and took the initiative to propose going to the Linggong sect to invite her to go down the mountain to help. When he saw Wan Hongling coming out, he thought it was Zi Yuan. Just as he was sighing in his heart that Zi Yuan's beauty was indeed worthy of her reputation, he heard the beautiful girl in front of him say that she was not Zi Yuan, but her Shiji. He suddenly felt a little disappointed. Ah, it turns out to be Zi Yuan's Shiji, Zhenren Wan Hongling? Wan Hongling said with a cold face, "Yes." Zhang Tianhe saw that her face was as cold as frost, which made her look even more beautiful. On the contrary, he looked forward to Zi Yuan even more. If the Shiji was so beautiful, then what about the Shiji? Thinking of this, the smile on Zhang Tianhe's face became more and more spirited. He said, "We came to your sect specially to invite the masters of your sect to help us. Let's go to the network." 7 KOM. Wan Hongling was stunned. Help? What help? Before Zhang Tianhe could speak, the beautiful Taoist nun next to him said loudly, "Little Shiji, why are you talking to her? I think the Linggong sect is already full of weeds, and the statues are covered with cobwebs. I think the kung fu of their daily cultivation must have been wasted. Why did you invite them? They can't fight, and when the time comes, they will have to take care of them. Wouldn't that be a few more burdens?" The short and fat Taoist priest next to him also stroked his beard and nodded. That's right. Wan Hongling had a fiery temper, so she couldn't bear it anymore. She stomped her feet and scolded, "What the hell are you talking about? My Shiji doesn't need to teach you a lesson. I can deal with you myself. If you don't believe me, let's fight one-on-one." The beautiful Taoist nun was also so angry that her eyebrows were raised. She sneered and said, "Do you think I'm afraid of a loser like you?" As she spoke, she was about to draw her sword. Zhang Tianhe hurriedly stopped the two of them. No, we are all from the same sect. We can't fight. Otherwise, if the leader blames us, we won't be able to bear the consequences." As he said this, he said to the Taoist nun next to him, "Shiji Zhou Ping, for my sake, okay?" Zhou Ping snorted and moved her hand away from the hilt of the sword behind her. She sneered and said, "If you really have the ability, let's go down the mountain together. When the time comes, let's see each other's true abilities." Wan Hongling said angrily, "Let's go. What's the big deal?" Zhang Tianhe laughed and said, well, with the help of the masters of the Linggong sect, our chances of winning have increased a little." The short and fat Taoist snorted and said, "Little Shiji, you think too highly of those witches. The 6 great sects besieging the Fox Zen school is already a sure win. Now with the addition of us, it's a sure thing. Why do you need to invite others? Wan Hongling heard it clearly and was shocked. She cried out involuntarily, besieging where? The Fox Zen School. Zhang Tianhe smiled and said, yes, it's the evil Fox Zen School. Wan Hongling had agreed without thinking before, but now she was complaining in her heart. She thought that with the relationship between Li Yundong and Su Chan, he would definitely not sit back and watch the Fox Zen School be besieged. Once he intervened, given the relationship between her Shiji and Li Yundong, she would definitely have a headache. Who would she help then? Wan Hongling's eyes were wide open. Just as she was in a daze, she heard Zhang Tianhe urge her, Jinren Hongling, let's not delay any longer. How about we go now? Wan Hongling seemed to wake up from a dream. She hesitated and complained in her heart, but she had been too confident before and couldn't refuse. She had no choice but to bite the bullet and follow them. When the group of people flew to Mount Tianlong near Dongwu City, they found an empty place to settle down. As soon as they landed, Wan Hongling said in surprise, is the Fox Zen School in this place? This place is very close to Dongwu City. The forces of Buddhism and our Taoist sects are very strong here. How dare they take root here? Zhang Tianhe smiled and said, this is where Lu Yi, the leader of the Fox Zen School, is cunning. He calculated that ordinary people would think that the Fox Zen School was hiding in the deep mountains and forests, so he did the opposite and hid them right under our noses. This is called the darkness under the lamp. Wan Hongling asked in confusion, when did the 6 great sects join forces to deal with the Fox Zen School? Zhou Ping snorted coldly and said, why do you talk so much nonsense? Wan Hongling said angrily, I think it's you who talk too much. Zhang Tianhe quickly came out to smooth things over. He said, we are all from the same sect. Don't quarrel, don't quarrel. As he said this, he explained to Wan Hongling, it's all because the Renyuan Jindan was stolen by Ao Wushuang of the Fox Zen School. Relying on her powerful spiritual energy and powerful magical weapons, she ran amok everywhere and finally aroused public anger. Hey, this time the 6 great sects have joined forces to uproot their nest. Let's see what she can do. Wan Hongling muttered to herself, the Renyuan Jindan is not in her hands. However, the 6 great sects have always been dirty with each other. Why are they working together this time? While she was muttering to herself, 2 cars drove over from the side of the road and took them to the hotel near Mount Tianlong. After arriving at the hotel, Wan Hongling found that the hotel had been booked, and the surroundings were filled with cultivators who were rarely seen. Wan Hongling looked at these cultivators carefully and saw that most of them were young people. They were the best of the younger generation in the cultivation world or the rising stars. Although these cultivators were young, there were a lot of them. In addition to the 6 great sects, there were also some cultivators from other sects who had heard the news and come to join in the fun. After calculating the strength of these cultivators in her heart, Wan Hongling secretly took a breath of cold air. Oh my, there are more than a dozen masters in the 6th heaven of the Huaning phase. Although the older generation of the 6 great sects have not come out, this lineup is enough to make the Fox Zen School suffer. It's a small matter that the Fox Zen School has been destroyed. If Su Chan is involved, I'm afraid that Li Yundong will go crazy. It's fine if he goes crazy, but what if my Shiji's cultivation is affected? Thinking of this, Wan Hongling couldn't sit still. She rolled her eyes and said to Zhang Tianhe, by the way, why don't I invite my Shiji here? That way, we can also increase our chances of winning. Zhou Ping and the stout Taoist sneered and snorted, but they didn't say anything. Zhang Tianhe was overjoyed. He said, that's great. I've been fascinated by Jinren Ziyuan for a long time. Where is she? I'll go and invite her myself. Wan Hongling was shocked. How could she dare to let Zhang Tianhe follow her? She quickly smiled dryly and said, she is cultivating in seclusion somewhere. Zhenren Zhang, you can wait here. I'll go. Zhang Tianhe smiled and said, well, I'll wait here for your good news. Zhou Ping, who was standing to one side, sneered, I think you're going to send a message, aren't you? This sentence shocked Wan Hongling so much that her heart started pounding. She couldn't help but fly into a rage. She turned her head and glared at Zhou Ping. I have no grudge against you in my previous life, nor do I have any grudges against you in this life. Why do you have to go against me? If you're not convinced, let's have a fight here. Zhou Ping just couldn't bear to see her get close to Zhang Tianhe, so she had ridiculed her. Seeing that everyone around her was looking at her, and Zhang Tianhe was also secretly glaring at her, she sneered and turned to leave. Wan Hongling also stopped while she was ahead. She pretended to be angry and rushed out of the hotel. As soon as she left the hotel, her face darkened. Just as she was about to fly up, she suddenly heard a loud bang in the sky. The sound of heavenly thunder was the most sensitive to cultivators. As soon as Wan Hongling heard this sound, her heart trembled and she subconsciously raised her head. She saw dark clouds covering the sky and the sun in the distance, and an extremely terrible pressure quickly rushed over. At this time, all the cultivators in the hotel heard the sound and rushed out, looking at the sky with frightened or serious expressions. When the beautiful Taoist nun Zhou Ping saw this, she was shocked and cried out involuntarily, someone is going through heavenly tribulation. Who is this? Is he crazy? How could he be going through heavenly tribulation in autumn? Zhang Tianhe was also shocked. He had been cultivating in the mountains. This was the first time he had left the mountains, the first time he had entered the secular world to cultivate, and the first time he had seen heavenly tribulation. A trace of horror and fear flashed through his eyes as he thought to himself, is this heavenly tribulation? It's really terrible. When Wan Hongling saw this, she was shocked and suddenly thought of something. She thought to herself, could it be that Li Yundong's heavenly tribulation has come? Thinking of this, she didn't dare to stay any longer and turned to leave. When the heavenly tribulation came, Wan Hongling didn't dare to fly. She quickly found a car and went straight to the nearest railway station. /OM/4527-894-1954. Chapter 252. Go to Watch Network. Li Yundong had never expected that he and Zi Yuan would cultivate in the spirit space of the purple gold jade plate for a whole week. During this week, Li Yundong didn't go out at all. He kept going back and forth between the spirit space and the spirit space, constantly challenging the heavenly thunder in the spirit space. At the beginning, he could dodge more than 10 bolts of heavenly thunder in a row. Then, he slowly dodged more than 30 bolts of heavenly thunder. In the end, he could even dodge more than 80 bolts of heavenly thunder in a row. After 7 days of intensive, high-intensity training, Li Yundong had become a completely different person. If the cultivation trip to Tibet had made Li Yundong reborn, his Jinshi had been tempered into steel, and he had formed a powerful Niden with the power of heavenly thunder, then this time, the cultivation in the spirit space of the purple gold jade plate had made Li Yundong suddenly exert the Jindan's qi in his body to the extreme, stimulating all his potential. At this time, the Niden in the lower dantian of Li Yundong's lower abdomen was more than 3 times stronger than before. Li Yundong's strength and speed had also risen, and the number of heavenly thunder he had dodged increased. In the spirit space, Li Yundong's figure was as fast as a wisp of smoke, shuttling between heaven and earth like lightning. Every time a bolt of heavenly thunder was about to fall, his hair would stand on end. He keenly felt the moment when the heavenly thunder was about to fall, and then dodged in an instant. At the moment he dodged the heavenly thunder, it hit the ground, and the powerful energy of the heavenly thunder instantly scattered in all directions. The few strands of black hair closest to Li Yundong were sucked into his body like gossamer. There were 9 layers in the sky and 9 layers in the earth. When the heavenly tribulation came, cultivators could hide in the 9 heavens or the 9 earths. Therefore, the heavenly tribulation had 81 paths. It struck the cultivators until they had nowhere to hide, and they would not rest until they were dead. After dodging the 79th bolt of heavenly thunder in a row, Li Yundong suddenly became excited. He realized that if he dodged 2 more times, he would be able to survive the 81 bolts of heavenly tribulation. But as soon as this thought flashed through his mind, his hair suddenly stood on end. Without thinking, Li Yundong immediately stamped his feet and flashed dozens of meters away in the blink of an eye. There was a loud rumble as a bolt of lightning struck the spot where he had been standing. In an instant, a large pit with a diameter of 10 meters appeared on the ground. As soon as Li Yundong landed on the ground, he immediately tapped his toes and jumped more than 100 meters away like lightning. A bolt of lightning followed him like a shadow and struck the place where he had landed before, creating another bottomless pit. After dodging 2 fierce heavenly thunder in a row, he found that there was no more heavenly thunder falling from the sky. Instead, the dark clouds kept rolling, as if they were accumulating power. Watch net. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He knew that the next last blow would be an earth-shattering one. He took a deep breath and quickly turned into a residual shadow. He was so fast that he couldn't even see his figure. Li Yundong knew that the heavenly thunder must have locked onto his position before it fell. He was swimming at such an amazing speed, so it was difficult for the heavenly thunder to lock onto his position, let alone hit him. But what Li Yundong had never expected was that just as he was moving quickly, there was a sudden loud bang in the sky. This sound almost shocked Li Yundong out of his wits. At this moment, Li Yundong even had a feeling that the sky had collapsed. In an instant, countless bolts of lightning fell from the spirit space. These bolts of lightning filled every corner of the spirit space. No matter how powerful Li Yundong Shintong was, there was no way for him to escape this blow. His figure was instantly swallowed up by the heavenly thunder. In the spirit space, Li Yundong was struck down by the last bolt of lightning. He shouted and woke up with a start, sweating profusely. Li Yundong had been fighting with the heavenly thunder in the spirit space before, and it could be said that he had never been tired of it. He had a kind of endless pleasure and excitement as if he was fighting with heaven. But when the last bolt of heavenly thunder came, at this moment, Li Yundong felt the real power of heaven's might. This was an overwhelming power, and there was no room for Li Yundong to resist at all. For the first time, Li Yundong felt fear and terror. Although he had already woken up, all the hair on his body was still standing on end. Every pore on his body was opening hysterically, as if they were about to let out a silent scream of fear. Go to the net. The moment he was struck by the heavenly thunder just now, Li Yundong felt as if an invisible big hand had reached out from the sky. This big hand was like the 5 fingers mountain of Buddha, pressing down on him, traveling monk's son, so that he had no room to resist at all. He could only surrender and wait for death. Can I really survive the heavenly tribulation? Li Yundong's Taoist heart, which was as hard as steel, cracked in an instant. After all, he was not an idiot, nor was he ignorant. No matter how fearless and brave he was, it was impossible for him to remain unmoved in the face of such heavenly might. Zi Yuan, who was standing to one side, couldn't help but feel her heart tremble when she saw his terrified expression. She thought to herself, oh no, he's wavering. Taoism placed great emphasis on the cultivation of one's mind. If one's mind was not firm, even if they had great magical powers, they might not be able to use them, let alone defeat cultivators with lower cultivation levels than themselves. However, a person with a firm mind would be able to exert his strength to the greatest extent. He could even often perform exceptionally well and defeat cultivators who were stronger than him but did not have a firm mind. The heavenly tribulation could be said to be the most powerful enemy that every cultivator had to face. In the face of such a powerful enemy, Li Yundong's mind was actually wavering. This could be said to be devastating news. Zi Yuan asked, "What's wrong with you?" Li Yundong stared straight ahead, his eyes unfocused. After a long time, he came to his senses and looked at Zi Yuan. He said slowly in a low voice, "I think I can't survive the heavenly tribulation." Although Zi Yuan had already guessed that Li Yundong was wavering, when she heard him say it with her own ears, her heart still skipped a beat and suddenly sank. She asked, "What happened? Even if you can't escape the heavenly tribulation, you don't have to be so discouraged." Li Yundong slowly closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and then exhaled heavily. He sighed and said, "The last heavenly thunder made me understand that the heavenly tribulation is so terrifying. No matter how capable I am, it's impossible for me to avoid it. This is only the heavenly tribulation simulated by the purple gold luo jade plate. If it were a real heavenly tribulation, what would I do?" As he spoke, Li Yundong couldn't help but smile bitterly and say, "I was too arrogant." Zi Yuan couldn't help showing anger on her face and shouted, "You've traveled 100 miles. The heavenly tribulation is coming soon. How can you give up at the last moment?" Li Yunyang shook his head in pain and said, "You don't know. When the last heavenly thunder came, the whole spirit space was filled with heavenly thunder. It was so dense that every inch of land was struck by heavenly thunder. How could I hide? It's impossible to avoid it." Zi Yuan still wanted to say something, but she stopped when the words reached her mouth. In fact, deep in her heart, she had never believed that Li Yundong could survive the heavenly tribulation. For thousands of years, only great cultivators who had cultivated to the immortal Jinshan phase were qualified to challenge the power of heaven and face the heavenly thunder. The immortal Jinshan phase was the highest phase of the seventh heaven. Since ancient times, few people had been able to cultivate to this phase. As for the cultivators who could survive the heavenly tribulation of the eighth heaven, without exception, they had all become immortals. In today's world, there was no one who could survive the heavenly tribulation and stay in the mortal world. Li Yundong had just begun to cultivate the Shentong of the fifth heaven. Although the high-intensity intensive cultivation in the past few days had improved his strength a lot, he had only improved from the primary phase of the Shentong to the intermediate phase. There was still a long way to go before he reached the advanced phase, not to mention the Yuanying phase of the sixth heaven and the Jinshan phase of the seventh heaven. There were 2 whole realms in between. How could he survive the heavenly tribulation? The heavenly tribulation was the most terrible tribulation for cultivators. There was nothing more difficult to deal with in the world than the heavenly tribulation. It was like asking a student who had not graduated from high school to do atomic bomb research. How could he possibly succeed? Thinking of this, Zi Yuan couldn't help but lose control of her Taoist heart. She couldn't help thinking, it's impossible. If he can't survive the heavenly tribulation, he will be killed by the heavenly thunder. If he dies, won't Master's psalm become a joke? Then what about my cultivation? Master said that my cultivation should be based on this poem, on the boy in front of me. Could it be that Master was wrong? Impossible, this is absolutely impossible. As soon as this thought flashed through Zi Yuan's mind, she immediately denied it. She thought to herself, Master has always been right. It's impossible for him to be wrong. But how can he survive the heavenly tribulation? Zi Yuan felt an unprecedented panic. She looked at Li Yundong anxiously, as if hoping for a miracle to happen to him. At this time, Li Yundong also slowly recovered from the fear of the heavenly thunder. He looked at the distant sky outside the balcony and suddenly said, the heavenly tribulation is coming. As soon as he finished speaking, he heard a loud bang in the sky. It could be said that there was a thunderbolt in the clear sky, causing the surrounding air to tremble violently. Then, countless dark clouds rolled over from the horizon, like an overwhelming tide. After a while, the dark clouds covered the sky and the earth, shrouding the entire Tiannan city. It really gave people a terrifying feeling of dark clouds pressing down on the city. After all, the simulated heavenly thunder in the spirit space was not as good as the real one. Li Yundong only felt as if there was a pair of incomparably majestic eyes staring at him in the sky. The air around him seemed to have become stagnant, as if countless invisible filaments were dragging his body, making it much heavier. Li Yundong took a deep breath and chuckled. He looked at the rolling dark clouds in the sky with an incomparably complicated look in his eyes. If it's a blessing, it's not a curse. If it's a curse, it can't be avoided. In the end, I can't avoid this knife. Let's go. Don't go through the heavenly tribulation here. Otherwise, you will be implicated. He turned to Zi Yuan and said, "You don't have to go. Help me take a message to Su Chan and tell her." Chapter 253. Go to watch net. Li Yundong left the gate of Hongqing New area and went straight to the suburbs. After running for more than 20 miles, the high-rise buildings gradually disappeared around him. Li Yundong followed the road to a sparsely populated place in the suburbs before he stopped. Go to watch net. 7 km. Not long after he stopped, he saw Zi Yuan rushing over from behind him. Li Yundong was stunned for a moment, then smiled and said, "What are you doing here? Are you here to help me collect my corpse?" Zi Yuan had followed him subconsciously. Even she didn't know what she was going to do. She was stunned for a moment and didn't answer. Li Yundong smiled self-deprecatingly and said, "There's no need to collect the corpse. Didn't you see that young master? He was smashed to pieces last time. His body and soul were destroyed. Even if you wanted to collect the corpse, you couldn't. It was all chopped clean. By the way, the heavenly tribulation is quite environmentally friendly and low carbon. Alas, it's a pity that I didn't buy insurance for myself in advance. Otherwise, I would have made a lot of money." Listening to Li Yundong's nagging, Zi Yuan felt strange in her heart. She wanted to laugh, but she couldn't. She couldn't help asking, "The heavenly tribulation is coming soon. Aren't you afraid?" Li Yundong laughed and said, "At first, I was very afraid, but it's useless to be afraid. Anyway, I'll die if I stick my head out, and I'll die if I shrink my head. I might as well die more naturally." After that, he told Zi Yuan like a talkative old woman, "I say, fairy sister, you are beautiful, but you lack a little bit of humanity. In the future, you won't be able to find a boyfriend." "What, you don't want to find a boyfriend? Are you going to be alone for the rest of your life? Isn't that a waste of God's gifts? Hey, you're not really going to find a man for the rest of your life, are you? Are you really not going to find one? Forget it, I won't force it. Anyway, I'm going to be taken away by the heavenly tribulation soon. It's not my turn to have such a good thing." Zi Yuan stared blankly at Li Yundong. When she heard the last sentence, she couldn't help but think of what her master had said. She asked, "Do you like me?" Li Yundong was stunned, then he laughed and said, "I was just saying it casually. Don't take it seriously." Zi Yuan was choked by Li Yundong. She looked at the boy in front of her, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Watch net. 7 km. Of course, although I already have Su Chan, I think you're still very good. Look at you, you're so beautiful, and you're so good at running a family. You're really the perfect wife and mother in the eyes of all men in the world. Hey, are you sure you want to stay single for the rest of your life? Hey, don't be the only one talking. You should say something too. I say, fairy sister, why don't you say something? Zi Yuan had been quietly listening to Li Yundong's nagging. Her face was the same as usual, but her heart was in a mess, and she couldn't sort it out no matter how hard she tried. Li Yundong muttered to himself for a while. Seeing that Zi Yuan was ignoring him, he suddenly pointed to the sky and cursed, F***ck God, I just killed a guy who is worse than a beast. Why do you want to kill me? F***ck, you blind thing, why don't you go to hell? In this world, good people are going to be struck by lightning, and bad people are getting away with it. What the F***ck are you doing? Li Yundong cursed loudly. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning fell from the sky and struck a mountain ridge in the distance. Li Yundong was stunned for a moment and then burst out laughing. Look carefully before you strike again. I'm right here. Zi Yuan looked at Li Yundong in a daze. She suddenly asked, Li Yundong, if I let you go back to the past, would you still use heavenly thunder to kill young Master He? Li Yundong was stunned. He didn't notice the subtext of Zi Yuan's words. He just sneered and said without hesitation, the one thing I don't regret the most in my life is to attract heavenly thunder to kill young Master He. If God gives me another chance, I hope I can kill him 10,000 times. Zi Yuan sighed heavily in her heart. She looked at Li Yundong with a complicated look in her eyes. For a moment, she didn't know what words to use to describe this boy. Li Yundong saw that Zi Yuan's expression was solemn, so he smiled and advised, you'd better leave quickly. It won't be good if you get implicated when the heavenly thunder strikes. Zi Yuan looked at Li Yundong and asked, you really don't regret it? Think about Su Chan. You won't be able to see her again. Won't you be sad? Li Yundong snorted and said, what's there to regret about this kind of thing? As a man, there are things that he can do and things that he can't. There are some things that I have to do even if I have to climb a mountain of knives and go down a sea of fire. But there are some things that I won't do even if there's a beautiful woman in front of me. As he spoke, he thought of Su Chan, and his expression softened. He sighed softly and said, it's just that I can't bear to part with my little girl. I just don't know if she can take good care of herself if I'm not around. When Li Yundong talked about Su Chan, he couldn't stop talking for a while. He kept talking to Zi Yuan about the little things that had happened between him and Su Chan, completely ignoring the fact that the dark clouds above their heads were getting denser and denser, and the number of lightning flashing in the clouds was getting more and more frequent. Go to the internet. 7 KOM. When he talked about the time when Su Chan's hand touched the electric switch of the socket, Li Yundong suddenly laughed. He said to Zi Yuan, by the way, didn't you want to know what it feels like to be roused? As he said this, he reached out to Zi Yuan. Zi Yuan looked at Li Yundong's outstretched hand and asked in confusion, what are you doing? Li Yundong winked at her and said, hold my hand. When the thunder strikes down later, you will know what it feels like to be roused. No matter how heavy Zi Yuan's mood was, she couldn't help but burst into laughter when she heard Li Yundong's witty words. She shook her head, sighed, and said, why are you still not serious at this time? Li Yundong said, you don't want to give me your hand? Well, you can only experience what it feels like to be roused in the future. After that, Li Yundong urged Zi Yuan, the thunder is coming soon. Hurry up and go. It's better for one to die than two. You are so beautiful. It would be a pity if you died with me. However, Zi Yuan just stood there and looked at Li Yundong with a frown. No matter how much Li Yundong tried to persuade her, she didn't move at all. She just looked at Li Yundong blankly. Li Yundong couldn't help but say angrily, hey, what are you doing? Do you want to die with me? Seeing that Zi Yuan was still motionless, he couldn't help but curse, hey, are you deaf or dumb? Go, what are you staying here for? Have you fallen in love with me and wanted to die with me? Idiot, get out of here. I'm annoyed when I see your dead face. Get out of here. If you don't go, I'll. Before he could finish his words, there was a sudden loud bang in the sky. Li Yundong's hair suddenly stood on end. With a tap of his feet, he instantly floated dozens of meters away. As soon as he landed, a bolt of heavenly thunder suddenly struck him heavily. After all, the heavenly thunder simulated by the purple gold jade plate could not be compared with the power of the real heavenly thunder. What's more, the main purpose of the former was to let Li Yundong continuously absorb the power of the heavenly thunder while dodging it, while the latter used the power of heaven and earth to kill Li Yundong. This time, the heavenly thunder was extremely fierce, and the world was suddenly illuminated by lightning. Li Yundong only felt that an unstoppable force of heaven's might was falling straight down from the top of his head. The power and speed of this thunder was far greater than that of the heavenly thunder in the spirit space of the purple gold jade plate. As soon as Li Yundong moved, the heavenly thunder struck where he had been. Although he dodged it, it still brushed past his body. Li Yundong suddenly felt that half of his body was numb, and he was completely out of control. The powerful and terrifying power of heavenly thunder began to rampage along the meridians in his body, like a wild beast. Li Yundong's heart suddenly shook. He knew that it was impossible for him to survive the thunder retribution with his own strength, but he hadn't expected that just the first bolt of thunder, which had only brushed past his body, would make him unable to move. When Zi Yuan, who was not far away, saw Li Yundong fall, her heart suddenly trembled. There seemed to be a voice in her mind shouting, "He is going to die. Isn't Master Psalm wrong? If he dies, what should I do?" Zi Yuan had lived under her master's protection all her life. She couldn't imagine what it would be like if the things she had deeply rooted in the past were completely overturned. Impossible, Master can't be wrong. He won't die. A thought suddenly flashed through Zi Yuan's mind. She subconsciously flew over, holding the purple gold jade plate in her palm, and held it up to the sky. The purple gold jade plate rotated quickly, emitting bursts of golden light. This golden light was like a tide, instantly swallowing her and Li Yundong's figures. At the instant they disappeared, a bolt of lightning suddenly fell from the sky and heavily struck the purple gold luo jade plate. The purple gold luo jade plate trembled violently, and the golden light it released became much brighter. Li Yundong only felt that his eyes were bright, and when he opened them, he was blind. He subconsciously closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, he found that he was already in the spirit space of the purple gold jade plate. At this time, although the power of thunder in his body was going crazy, he still suppressed his chaotic qi and asked, "What are you doing here?" Zi Yuan had suddenly intervened to help Li Yundong get through the heavenly tribulation. She didn't know whether he could get through it or not. If he could, it would be fine. If he couldn't, both of them would be finished. At the moment of life and death, even though Zi Yuan was calm and composed, her forehead couldn't help being covered with sweat. She said to Li Yundong in a low voice, "Take care of your injuries and don't worry about anything else." Li Yundong looked at Zi Yuan with a complicated look in his eyes. In the end, he closed his eyes and began to mobilize the qi in his body to fight against the power of thunder. The wonder of the purple gold sifting jade plate was that not only could it capture the other party's spirit qi and create a simulated human body in the minor thousand world, it could also directly capture the other party's entire body into its own minor thousand world. At this time, Li Yundong and Zi Yuan were both hiding in the purple gold jade plate. The heavenly thunder outside could only break the purple gold jade plate first, and then it could kill Li Yundong and Zi Yuan. After watching Li Yundong sit cross-legged and meditate, Zi Yuan raised her head worriedly and looked at the situation of the spirit space around her. Every time a bolt of heavenly thunder fell from the outside world and struck the purple gold jade plate, the spirit space would shake violently, and the earth would shake. Zi Yuan's heart would tremble involuntarily. She didn't know whether the purple gold jade plate could withstand it, or how many times it could withstand it. The heavenly thunder struck down one after another, and the spirit space trembled with it. Gradually, Ziyuan found that cracks began to appear in the sky of the spirit space, and the green trees in the mountains began to wither in large swathes. Every time the world shook, there would be mountains collapsing and the earth cracking. Oh no, the spirit space of the purple gold jade plate is beginning to collapse. Ziyuan was shocked. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.